Name's Nathan. I'm 34, married, 2 kids, and I work in IT consulting, which sounds a lot fancier than it is. I've never been the golden child. That title's belonged to my younger sister, Leah, ever since she popped out smiling and wrapped my parents around her little finger. I was the serious one, the moody one, the one who, according to my mom, just doesn't know how to lighten up and be part of the family. I used to try. I really did. But over the years, those small digs and sideways comments from my mom and sister wore me down. My wife, Ellie, always told me, "Nate, you're not imagining it." But I kept giving them chances. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? They're family. This story starts last Christmas. Ellie didn't want to go. She had that look in her eye, the one that said, "This is going to end badly," but she stayed quiet because she knew how hard I was trying to make peace. We'd been covering some of Leah's expenses for the last couple of years. She'd lost her job, had a rough breakup, and suddenly couldn't pay her rent. My parents swooped in with emotional support, but not a dime of financial help. So of course, we stepped in. Quietly. I paid her credit cards, helped with her lease, even bought groceries through an online delivery service so she wouldn't feel ashamed if someone saw her using a food pantry. At the time, it didn't even feel like a choice. She was my sister. She said she just needed a little time. Time turned into 18 months. We pulled into my parents' driveway on Christmas Eve. Snow was falling in those perfect movie flakes, and the house was glowing with fairy lights. From the outside, it looked like a holiday card. Inside, it was more like a live-action audition for a toxic family sitcom. The moment we walked in, Mom gave me that pursed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Leah was already sipping wine on the couch in a red dress that looked designer. She saw us, smirked, and waved lazily. Dinner was tense. Every time Ellie tried to speak, Mom talked over her. Leah kept asking my kids, ages 7 and 5, if they'd finally learned to behave in public. I bit my tongue so hard during dessert, I tasted blood. Then, the toast happened. Mom stood up, glass of white wine in hand, and said, "Here's to family, to new beginnings, and to accepting that sometimes you spend thousands raising a child and end up with a disappointment." The silence was brutal. Ellie's hand slid under the table and squeezed mine. I didn't move at first, just stared at my mom while my brain played catch-up with what I'd just heard. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and sent her exactly $1. I turned the screen to her and said, "Debt's settled." The room was ice. Leah let out this dramatic, fake gasp, like she was watching a soap opera. "Oh my God, Nathan," she said, drawing out every syllable. "Do you have to be so dramatic? No wonder nobody likes you at work. You always take everything so personally." Then she laughed and looked right at Ellie. "Next year, do us all a favor and don't bring your pathetic little family." You lower the tone. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just took a slow sip of my drink, looked her straight in the eye, and said calmly, "To my sister, living like a queen on my money, until tonight." That's when I saw her face twitch. The moment where her brain caught up to mine and started doing the math. We left without saying goodbye. Just stood up, gathered the kids, and walked out. Nobody followed us. The entire ride home was silent, except for the sound of my son humming Christmas music in the back seat. Ellie didn't ask what I meant. She knew. She knew I'd been keeping receipts, keeping track, holding the line. And I think she also knew that line had finally snapped. When we got home, I sat down in the office and opened up every account. Banking, utilities, subscriptions, shared credit cards, everything tied to my name or my business. And Leah's access? Gone. I reversed the transfers I could, froze the joint cards, called my bank and flagged every automatic transaction from her zip code. I shut it all down. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean, like something had finally been cut loose. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, my phone had already started buzzing before I even brushed my teeth. 27 missed calls, 14 voicemails, and one very long text from Leah that started with WTF and ended with "You can't do this to me." I hadn't even poured my coffee when my mom called. I let it ring. That's when Leah sent the last message. It was just a screenshot of her bank app, a giant red zero, and a declined Netflix charge. Underneath it, she wrote, "You're a monster." That was the moment I knew she still didn't get it. Still didn't understand that generosity isn't a right, it's a choice. One I'd made too many times already. But what really set everything in motion wasn't what she said next. It was what she did 2 hours later when she showed up at my house with my mom and tried to force her way inside. I heard the pounding on the door before I even saw the car pull up. It was still early, maybe 9 a.m., and I was in the kitchen making pancakes for the kids. Ellie looked up from her coffee, gave me a questioning look, and I just knew. I opened the curtain and saw them. My mom, arms crossed in that way she thinks makes her look dignified, and Leah standing beside her, red-faced, dressed like she hadn't even bothered to change out of yesterday's outfit. Her mascara was smudged, hair pulled into a messy bun. She definitely didn't mean to be stylish. They weren't just mad. They were humiliated. And somehow that was my fault. I opened the door and didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Leah didn't wait. She stormed in like she owned the place. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped. "I tried to buy groceries this morning and my card declined. Then my Uber didn't go through. Then my phone bill." Mom followed right behind her, pinching the bridge of her nose like she was the victim here. "Nathan, whatever this tantrum is, stop it now. This is Christmas. You've made your point, and now you're being cruel." Ellie stood up from the kitchen table. Calm, quiet, but her eyes were sharp. "Actually," she said, "he hasn't made his point yet. You just haven't been listening for the last 3 years." Leah spun on her. "Nobody was talking to you." Ellie didn't flinch. "No, you never do. But I'm talking now." I felt a chill go down my spine. Ellie rarely got involved directly. She always supported me privately, always played peacemaker when things got ugly. But this time, she was standing her ground. "In our home. Do you have any idea," she said, her voice steady, "how much he's done for you? Paid your rent, covered your credit card debt, bought you groceries while you shopped online like a Kardashian. And not once did you say thank you. Not once." "That's not true," Leah started. "Isn't it?" I cut in, finally speaking. "Tell me the last time you paid for your own life, Leah. The last time you didn't send me a sob story the minute you overdraft on another handbag." Mom stepped between us like she was breaking up a bar fight. "All right, enough. This is still your sister. You don't air family business like this. And as her older brother, it's your duty to help when things are hard." That word, duty, lit something in me I'd been trying to ignore for years. It was the same word she'd used when she guilt-tripped me into co-signing Leah's lease. The same word when she asked me to be a man and cover Dad's hospital bill without telling anyone it was actually Leah who caused the insurance to lapse by never sending in the paperwork she promised she would. "Mom," I said slowly, "you raised me to be responsible, to take care of others. I did that. For years. For all of you. But you never taught Leah to do the same. And now she thinks my money is hers by default. She's family." Mom snapped. "So am I said. "But apparently, I'm the disappointment you toasted to last night." That shut her up. Leah scoffed, arms flailing. "So what? You're cutting me off completely? Throwing me out like trash because of one joke? That toast was Mom's idea, by the way." I just laughed. Ellie crossed her arms. "You didn't just laugh. You added a comment about our kids being low class. You told us not to come back. And now you want access to our accounts again." "I didn't mean it." Leah shouted. "God, you people are so dramatic. You really think I'd be living like this if I had other options?" "You have options," I said. "You just never choose them. You only ever choose the easy one. Me." She froze. That was the first time I'd ever said it plainly. The truth hung in the air, thick and ugly. She looked at me, blinking, lips parted, but no words came out. My mom stepped forward and reached for my arm. "Nathan," she said quietly, "she's your sister. And we're your family. This is vindictive." That word stung. Vindictive. As if I were doing this out of malice. As if I hadn't been swallowing insult after insult, debt after debt, for years just to keep some warped version of family peace alive. "No," I said. "It's a boundary. And the difference between the two is that this one's long overdue." I walked over to the hallway table, picked up a white envelope, and handed it to Leah. She looked confused. Then she opened it. Inside was a neat breakdown. Every transaction I'd made for her in the last 18 months. Rent payments, utility bills, credit card debt, subscription fees, even a few petty purchases like Uber rides and random charges from high-end beauty stores. It was organized, color-coded, dated. There was a final number at the bottom. She blinked at it. "I'm not asking for it back," I said. "That's not the point. I just wanted you to see it. To see exactly how much of my life I've handed to you." She went pale. My mom tried to tear the paper from her hand, but Leah held onto it like it burned. You kept track? She whispered. Because I had to. Because I knew, deep down, I need proof someday. That I wasn't crazy. That I didn't imagine how deep this went. They didn't speak. For the first time in my life, they had no comeback. Finally, I opened the door. You can go now, I said. Merry Christmas. They left. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Later that night, I got a call. Not from Leah, but from someone else entirely. Someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. And what he said on the phone made me realize this went way deeper than I thought. The call came just after 11 p.m. I was in the living room, lights dimmed, watching Ellie wrap one last gift for our youngest. The kids were asleep upstairs, and the house had finally settled into that warm holiday quiet. My phone buzzed once, lighting up the screen. I almost didn't pick up. The number wasn't saved. But something about the area code made my stomach turn. It was Alan, my cousin. I hadn't spoken to Alan in over a year, not because we'd fought, but because he'd quietly distanced himself from the family drama, especially after what happened at his mother's funeral. That day, Mom and Leah tried to redirect the post-service lunch into a pitch for Leah's new business idea. Alan didn't even respond, just stood up, walked out, and never looked back. So when I answered the call and heard his voice, low and cautious, I knew it wasn't a social check-in. Hey, Nate. Sorry to call this late. You got a minute? Yeah, of course. Everything all right? He paused, like he was debating whether or not to say what he needed to say. I heard Leah showed up at your place this morning. With your mom. I sat up straighter. Yeah. How do you know that? Because she called me right after. That gave me pause. Leah hadn't spoken to Alan in over 2 years. Not since she borrowed money from him, $3,000, allegedly to fix her car, and then ghosted him when he asked for a repayment plan. She called you. I repeated. Yeah. Said you cut her off. Said you humiliated her. She was crying. Honestly, it took me a second to even believe it was her. Then she asked if I could wire her money to cover a few bills until she gets back on her feet. I rubbed my temple. Unbelievable. That's not why I called, though, Alan said, his voice hardening. I asked her why she didn't just ask your mom. Or your dad. And she laughed. Said they're tapped out. Said she's been borrowing from them for years, and everything they've got is because of you. My blood ran cold. Alan went on. She told me your parents' house is basically being paid with your help. That your dad refinanced a loan to help you with your business, but the money actually went to her. I felt like the floor tilted. Wait, I said slowly, my dad took out a loan? You didn't know? Alan said. She sure made it sound like you did. I stood up and walked to the window, heart thudding. I had helped my dad once, maybe 3 years ago, when he needed some upfront cash after retiring early. But I never told him to take a loan. And I certainly never knew anything about refinancing. She also said something weird, Alan added. That she was supposed to be protected no matter what. That there was an agreement. My voice was hoarse. What kind of agreement? Alan sighed. I don't know. She was being vague. But she said, Nathan made a promise to Mom and Dad. If they ever needed anything, he'd make sure they were covered. That's why I'm not worried. Then she laughed. Said he owes us. I didn't even respond. Because suddenly, all the puzzle pieces I'd been ignoring fell into place. The repeated requests for small help. The guilt trips from my mother when I hesitated. The reason why every time I offered to teach Leah how to manage a budget, she'd snap. That's not my job. The monthly payments my dad had stopped mentioning altogether. The weird silence whenever I'd ask why Leah's name was never on anything, despite co-owning things with my parents. It was a setup, a structure, a long con wrapped in family guilt. Alan spoke again. Look, man, I'm not trying to stir things up, but you deserve to know. Something about the way she said it. It felt rehearsed. Like this has been going on way longer than you realize. Yeah, I said, my throat dry. I'm starting to see that. Alan paused. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. But thanks for telling me. Really. Any time, he said. And Nate, be careful. I don't think she's done yet. I hung up and just stood there, staring into the quiet street outside. Snow had started falling again. Soft and peaceful and utterly at odds with what was now spinning in my head. Ellie came over and wrapped her arms around me. What happened? I told her. Everything. And for a few seconds after, she just stood still, her cheek against my shoulder. I knew they were bad with money, she said finally. But this is a whole other level. And this wasn't just petty entitlement. This was financial manipulation on a scale I hadn't even noticed until it was spelled out for me by someone outside the bubble. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I pulled out every document I had: old emails, transaction histories, screenshots of messages from my mom and Leah. I printed everything, made a binder. I wasn't sure why, not yet, but I needed to see the full picture. I needed to know just how deep this went. And as I started flipping through it, something stood out. One small payment, labeled consulting gift, from my business account. It was from 6 months ago. I didn't remember making it. And that's when I realized someone else had access to my business funds. I didn't speak. I just stared at the screen, heart slamming in my chest. The payment was small, $600, but it was the memo line that stopped me cold. Consulting gift L. And the account it came from? One of my LLC's secondary cards. A card I hadn't touched in over a year because I kept it in a drawer at my parents' house for emergencies. Or at least, I thought I had. I ran back through old emails, then into my bank's interface. There it was. A pattern. Small, infrequent withdrawals going back 10 months. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Sometimes $300, sometimes $700. Always under the threshold that would trigger a call from the bank. Always vague memos. Transport, setup help, service fee. I'd missed them because they weren't big enough to seem alarming, and because I trusted my family to respect boundaries. That was my first real mistake. I looked up at Ellie. They've been siphoning from the business. Her eyebrows pulled together, slowly, like it hurt to process. They what? They've been using my business card. Someone got hold of it. It was supposed to be at my parents' house, but I never retrieved it after the last time I visited. I thought it was safe. I paused. It's not just Leah. I think Mom knew. Maybe even Dad. We sat in silence for a while. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. The lies, the small favors, the gaslighting, the guilt trips disguised as holiday toasts. And worst of all, the casual confidence with which Leah lived off of me, believing it was her birthright. I spent the next 3 days reviewing every single account. I called my bank, my accountant, and even a lawyer friend from college. The evidence was clear. Leah had accessed the card. Most charges were tied to a recurring IP address matching her apartment complex. She'd paid off her beauty school tuition with my funds, bought clothes, dinners, even a hotel stay at a luxury spa. My parents hadn't touched the card themselves, but the payments they were making on their home, those came from a side arrangement, routed through a joint account I'd helped open years ago to help Dad retire early. So yes, they all knew. I'll be honest, I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. The betrayal hit in waves, and each one felt colder than the last. These weren't strangers. These were the people I'd grown up with, shared dinners with, held in the hospital. People who had, at one time, claimed they loved me. What kind of love does this? I gave myself until New Year's Eve to finish my plan. I wanted one final gesture, one final closing chapter. And if they wanted to call it vindictive, fine. But for the first time, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me, and for my wife, and for my kids, who deserved to grow up without watching their father be used like a personal ATM. I waited until the family's annual New Year's dinner. Same house, same traditions. But this time, I didn't walk in with gifts. I didn't show up with Ellie or the kids. I came alone, dressed clean, calm, and holding a black folder under my arm. They looked surprised to see me. Mom gave me a tight smile. Leah looked like she'd spent the past week pretending none of it happened. She waved at me like we were still in junior high and hadn't had a single conversation about theft and manipulation. Nate, Mom sang, we weren't sure you'd come. It's been such a weird week. Miscommunications, tension, but it's good to end things on a fresh note. I smiled politely. I won't be staying long. Leah poured herself more wine and kicked her heels up on the coffee table. Oh, come on. You're not still mad, are you? It's New Year's. Let's start clean. All that money stuff. Water under the bridge. I stared at her, and that was when I realized she genuinely thought nothing was going to happen, that I'd vented my little tantrum and now, like always, would return to the role of passive provider. I opened the folder. Inside were several things. A printout of every unauthorized transaction from my business card, a copy of the card's access log, a notarized letter revoking all family members' financial access to my accounts, and the formal notice that I'd reported the charges. Oh, and a copy of a cease and desist drafted by my lawyer, stating that if any of them tried to contact or involve themselves in my financial affairs again, legal action would follow. I placed the folder on the coffee table. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to let you know what happens next. All of this," I gestured to the folder, "has already been filed. The fraud report, the bank freeze, and the audit on both personal and business accounts." Leah laughed. "You're being so dramatic. You're seriously pressing charges over a few $100? Thousands," I corrected. "And yes, because it wasn't your money. And you knew it." Mom stood up, arms crossed, her voice cold. "You're going to ruin this family over money? You ruined this family over money the second you used guilt to justify theft," I said. "You made your choice. This is mine. I gave you life," she snapped. "And I gave you trust," I replied. "One of us broke the deal." Leah started to panic, flipping through the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You can't. There's no proof. This is harassment." "No, it's accountability." I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I said one last thing. I've spent most of my life believing that being the responsible one meant keeping the peace. It doesn't. It just made me your safety net. That ends tonight. And I left. That night, I sat with Ellie and the kids by the fire. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't need to. We were finally free. Over the next few weeks, Leah tried to reach out, first through angry texts, then through more emotional ones, and finally through mutual friends. I never replied. Mom tried once, too, left a voicemail crying, saying how this would tear the family apart. But I'd learned something powerful. If a relationship survives only because one person allows themselves to be used, it's not a relationship. It's a trap. The fraud case went through. I didn't press full charges. I just wanted the bank to close the card and investigate the breach, which they did. Leah lost her access. My parents had to start paying their own bills again. And me? I kept working, kept living, and finally, started building a future that wasn't tied to the past. I still love the idea of family. But now I know, real family doesn't take. It builds. It supports. And most of all, it respects the hand that's reaching out. Mine had been bitten too many times. And I wasn't reaching anymore. My name's Derek, I'm 31, and a year ago, I caught my younger brother in bed with my fiancée. That moment split my life in two, before and after. It was one of those scenes you think only happens in bad movies or internet horror stories. I wish it had been fake. I wish I hadn't walked into my own apartment a day early, flowers in hand, ready to surprise my fiancée Hannah after a business trip, only to hear her giggle from the bedroom, followed by my brother's voice. Familiar, casual, carefree, like he belonged there. I don't remember dropping the flowers, but I remember the silence after they landed. The stunned look on their faces, like I was the one who had broken into their world. Like I was the one intruding. My brother, Jake, jumped up, tripping over the sheets like some idiotic deer in headlights, mumbling something about how it just happened. Hannah didn't even try to explain. She sat there on the bed, wrapped in my sheets, staring at the floor like it would swallow her. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I just walked out. That silence stuck with me for weeks, like a ghost that wouldn't shut up. Jake is 28. The golden child, as my parents still call him, though never to my face. He's always been that guy. The charming screw-up who could crash his car and somehow make the cop apologize. He's got that kind of energy, you know? People mistake charisma for character. My parents did. So did Hannah, apparently. And me? I was the responsible one. The boring one. The planner. I put in the hours, kept the peace, held the flashlight while Dad worked under the car, paid for Jake's messes more times than I can count. But after that day, I cut them both out. Jake. Hannah. Cold turkey. I ghosted every call, deleted every text. My parents tried reaching out, of course. At first, it was soft, concerned. Then it turned into guilt tripping. My mom said things like, "Families survive worse." My dad tried logic. "You and Hannah weren't married yet. It's not like he ruined a marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own blood trying to sweep this betrayal under the rug like it was some college prank. It confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. That Jake could do no wrong in their eyes. Not even this. The weeks after the breakup were a blur. I moved out of the city, took a remote project with my firm, and rented a cabin upstate. I spent that fall chopping wood, cooking for one, and learning how loud a silent room can be. It sounds cliché, but that isolation healed something in me. I got therapy. I started journaling. I even learned to make a decent chicken marsala. And slowly, I stopped hearing their voices in my head. I started living again. Then came Claire. We met the following spring, completely by accident, if you believe in that sort of thing. I'd driven into town for groceries, and the bakery had a sign advertising almond croissants, my one weakness. She was behind the counter, flour on her cheek, tying up a box with twine like she was wrapping up happiness itself. We talked, laughed. I came back the next day, then the next. Before long, I wasn't just getting croissants, I was getting Claire. She wasn't like Hannah. Claire had this calm warmth to her, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She asked about my day and actually listened. She didn't mind silence. She filled it with comfort, not noise. And unlike Hannah, she had no idea about my family drama, at least not at first. I didn't want to burden her with it, but after 6 months, it all came out over wine and a thunderstorm. She didn't pity me. She didn't rush to offer advice. She just held my hand, like she knew exactly how much it had cost me to say it out loud. That was the night I knew I'd marry her. We got engaged in the fall. A small picnic by the lake. No Instagram. No fireworks. Just the two of us, the leaves, and a ring I'd spent 6 months saving for. Claire cried when she saw it. Not because it was big. It wasn't. But because I told her what it meant. A new start. A vow to never repeat the past. A promise she could trust. Word traveled fast. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a year, but somehow they found out, probably through some extended cousin who still stalked my Facebook. The next week, I got a voicemail from Mom. Then another. Then a long, drawn-out email titled Olive Branch. I didn't open it for days. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. Paragraphs of carefully worded, guilt-laced manipulation. Phrases like, "We're still your parents," and "family is all we have in the end." And the kicker, "Jake is truly sorry." I deleted it. Then I got the text from Dad. "We want to help pay for the wedding." At first, I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of Claire's apartment. The same people who had defended Jake now wanted to pitch in like nothing had happened. Claire saw my reaction and asked what was up. I told her. She raised her eyebrows and just said, "That's unexpected." She never told me what to do. That's what I appreciated about her. But I could see the unspoken thought in her eyes. Are you really going to let them back in? And that's when the old knot in my chest came back. Not because I wanted their money. I didn't. Claire and I were planning a small wedding. But the idea of seeing Jake again, standing there with his smug smile and easy apologies, pretending he hadn't set fire to my life, that churned something in me. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't even ready to forget. Still, something in that offer felt strategic. Like a test. They weren't just offering money. They were offering strings. Conditions. The illusion of reconciliation wrapped in dollar signs. I could smell the setup from a mile away. And then came the final ask. "If we pay for the wedding, will you invite your brother?" It was my mom's voice on speaker. I hadn't answered their calls in months, but Claire convinced me to take just one for closure. Instead, I got ambushed. "To heal the family," Mom said. "That's all we want, Derek. For this family to be whole again." I stared at Claire across the kitchen table, her hand still in mine, her eyes calm but wary. And that's when an idea started forming. A very different kind of idea. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Something else entirely. Something Jake would never see coming. And that's when things really began. I wish I could say I hung up right then and there. That I told my parents where they could shove their healing and walked away with my dignity intact. But that's not what happened. Instead, I sat there, phone still on speaker, my mother's voice filling the room like the static of a broken radio. Claire said nothing, just watched me closely, her thumb brushing slow circles into my hand. That was her way of grounding me. And in that moment, I needed it more than I realized. "Jake has changed," my mom went on, like she was reading from some internal PR script. "He's in therapy now. He's trying so hard to make things right. He regrets everything." My father chimed in next, tone clipped and rehearsed. "We're not asking you to be best friends again. Just invite him. Let him be there for your big day." There it was. The real ask. I could feel the bait hanging in the air, like a trap that had been set a long time ago. I imagined them rehearsing this call over dinner, probably the same dinner Jake was sitting at, smirking across the table, certain that his charm would win again. My stomach turned. I'll think about it, I said. Not because I wanted to, not because I forgave them, but because something in me stirred, something deeper than anger. A stillness, a clarity. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a while. Claire broke it first. You're not seriously considering inviting him, are you? No, I said, then paused. But I might let him think I am. Claire tilted her head. That sounds dangerous. I know, I said, but so is letting him think he got away with it. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind wandered back to all the moments Jake had stepped on me and walked away untouched. The time he borrowed my car and returned it with a busted side mirror, claiming it was like that when he got it. The time he faked a college internship and let our parents believe he was working at some fancy firm while I pulled double shifts to cover rent. They always defended him, always smoothed it over. He was going through something. He was finding himself. And I was the one expected to suck it up and keep the peace. It wasn't just the betrayal with Hannah. It was the years before that, the quiet erosion of boundaries, the unspoken expectation that my life should bend to accommodate his. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was done. The next few weeks were strangely quiet. I didn't respond to my parents' follow-up texts. I didn't take Jake's bait when he messaged me on Instagram with a casual, "Heard you're getting married. Man, congrats." Like we were just long-lost buddies catching up. I ignored it. Instead, I focused on the wedding. Claire and I had decided on a vineyard 2 towns over. A simple outdoor ceremony, nothing flashy. We picked wildflowers from the field behind her bakery, and her best friend Ellie helped design the invitations. It was ours entirely. No hotels, no ballrooms. Just good people, good food, and one day that wasn't soaked in family drama. Or so I thought. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my cousin Matt. We hadn't spoken much lately, but he was one of the few relatives I actually respected, laid back, observant, and not one to buy into family politics. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up, he said. I ran into Jake at Uncle Ray's thing last night. I braced myself. Yeah. He's telling everyone he's gonna be your best man. I blinked. What? Swear to God. Said you guys had this emotional reunion. Said you forgave him. Even said he helped plan the proposal. I sat back, heart pounding. He's lying. I figured, Matt said. Just thought you should know. Your mom was eating it up, too. Acting like this whole thing is some rom-com ending. That was the moment the air changed. I could feel it in my bones, the way a dog senses a storm. This wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. Jake wasn't looking for peace. He was rewriting the story, turning himself into the misunderstood hero who won back his brother's love through tears and therapy. And our parents? They were helping him do it. I didn't sleep that night either. A few days later, I caved and called my mom. I wanted to hear it from her directly. Maybe part of me still hoped Matt had exaggerated. Maybe part of me still wanted to be wrong. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Did you tell people Jake's going to be my best man? There was a pause. Then, in the most delicate tone she could muster. Sweetheart, it just made things easier. People were asking. Easier for who? For the family, she said quickly. You don't understand the tension this has caused. Your aunts, your uncles, they've had to take sides. It's been exhausting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So instead of telling the truth, you made up a story. I was protecting you, she said, like that was some kind of moral high ground. No, I said coldly. You were protecting Jake. There was a longer pause this time, the kind that swells with everything unsaid. You always think the worst of him, she finally said. But he's not the monster you've built up in your head. He slept with my fiancée, I said, while we were still engaged, while we were planning our wedding. And he's apologized for that, she snapped, suddenly defensive. He's doing the work. He's trying to heal. What about me? I asked, voice trembling now. Who's trying to heal me? Silence. That was my breaking point. I hung up. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked out onto the porch, let the night air hit my face, and just stood there until Claire came out and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't need words. I just needed that. Her. I wish I could say things settled after that. That my silence made them back off. But it didn't. A week before the wedding, Claire's friend Ellie came to us, eyes wide. You're not going to believe this, she said. Jake reached out to me. Claire and I exchanged a look. He what? He said he's planning a surprise toast at the reception. Said you gave him your blessing. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He sent me this too, she added, pulling out her phone. There it was. A photo of Jake in a tux, holding a glass of champagne, captioned, "For my brother and his beautiful bride. Better late than never, huh?" Claire stared at the screen, then at me. Derek. I clenched my jaw. He's not just crashing the wedding. He's making himself the main character. Ellie bit her lip. I wasn't sure if it was a prank or... It's not, I said. It's Jake. And that's when the final pieces clicked into place. He wasn't just coming to the wedding to heal the family. He was coming to hijack it. To turn our day into his redemption arc. To walk into that vineyard like the prodigal son, charming the crowd, maybe even dropping a few tears to seal the performance. And I knew, in that moment, I couldn't just let it happen. Because there was one more thing Jake didn't know. One final twist he hadn't accounted for. He didn't know who Claire really was, or what she used to mean to him. Because once upon a time, long before me, back when Claire and Jake were in college together, she was the one girl Jake had wanted. The one girl he couldn't charm. The one girl who saw through him. She'd never told me much about it. Just that he'd asked her out once, and she'd said no. Politely. Then again, and again, until it got weird. Until he started showing up at the bakery when she was working. Leaving notes. Making jokes that didn't feel like jokes. Claire had brushed it off at the time. But now, he was about to see her walk down the aisle. Wearing white. On my arm. And the best part? He didn't even know it yet. But he would. And when he did, everything would fall apart. Right there. In front of 200 guests. And that's when I'd be ready to grab the mic. The strange thing about rock bottom is that you don't usually realize you've hit it until something small, something dumb, makes it obvious. For me, it wasn't catching Jake in bed with my fiancée. It wasn't watching my own parents defend him like I was some overreacting child. It wasn't even hearing that he was bragging to people about giving a surprise toast at my wedding. Like this whole thing was some grand sitcom finale where everything gets tied up with a bow. No, it was a week before the wedding, in the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon, when I walked into the bakery to surprise Claire with coffee and found her sitting on the floor in the back, head in her hands, crying. Not sobbing, not weeping, just crying. Soft, exhausted. I stood there for a second, frozen in place with 2 paper cups in my hand and a knot forming in my throat. I didn't say anything at first. I just knelt beside her and offered her the coffee. She smiled, even as her cheeks were still wet. "I'm okay," she whispered. "It's just been a long day." But I knew better. Claire didn't cry like that for a long day. Claire cried when something weighed on her so much that she couldn't carry it anymore without it spilling out. So I sat down beside her, ignoring the faint scent of flour and cinnamon in the air, and asked her what happened. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red, and said, "I don't think your mom likes me." I blinked. "What?" "She's been calling," she said softly. "Texting. Asking questions like, 'Are you sure Derek's ready for this?' Or does he talk about Hannah often? Like I'm just the rebound bride." My jaw tightened. "She said she doesn't want you to make a decision you'll regret because of how much pressure you've been under," Claire went on. "And I get it. I do. But it just made me feel like I'm not really welcome." I stared at the floor. My mom, the same woman who cried on the phone begging to heal the family, was now quietly undermining the one person who had helped me put myself back together. I wanted to drive to her house and scream. I wanted to call her and demand she never speak to Claire again. But instead, I sat there quiet, because something inside me finally cracked. This wasn't a family trying to heal. This was a family trying to pretend none of it happened. To replace reality with a curated version of events where Jake made a mistake, I overreacted, and everyone else just wants things to go back to normal. But there was no normal to go back to. I squeezed Claire's hand and said, "You're not a rebound. You're the reason I know I never want to settle for anything less again." She smiled, faintly, and I think that helped. But later that night, when I was alone in the guest room of her apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection. Not angry, not broken, just tired. That was rock bottom. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, like a slow leak in your chest that you only notice once it's empty. The next morning, I sent 2 texts. One to my parents, "Don't contact Claire again," and one to Jake, "Don't show up at the wedding." No explanations. No room for debate. Then I turned my phone off for 3 days. During that time, something shifted. I stopped caring whether they understood. I stopped hoping they'd wake up one day and realize what they had done. Instead, I got to work. I took the hurt and folded it into planning. Real planning. Not the kind that makes Pinterest boards, but the kind that sets up emotional firewalls. I called the venue and arranged for private security. Not bulky bodyguards, but two local guys who worked at the vineyard part-time and could quietly escort anyone off the property if needed. I sent them photos of Jake. I gave them a heads up on my parents too, just in case. Claire didn't ask questions. She trusted me. That trust was what carried me through the week. In between the final fittings and floral arrangements, I started writing a speech. Not a toast. Not a thank you list. A speech. One I'd only read if Jake pulled something. It wasn't petty. It wasn't angry. It was the truth. Everything that had been hidden or swept under the rug, laid bare in front of everyone who needed to hear it. It started with the betrayal, then moved into the silence, then ended with the healing. I read it once in the mirror, just to see if I could do it without shaking. I couldn't. Not yet. But the act of writing it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. And with control came clarity. I started going on walks again. Not to burn off anger, but just to breathe. Claire and I had dinner outside under the string lights behind her bakery. We danced in the living room, barefoot, to songs from an old record player she'd found at a garage sale. For the first time, our lives felt like they were expanding again, not just patching up holes from the past. Even my work life started to bounce back. My boss, who had given me space for months, finally reached out with a promotion. Something remote. Flexible. A role I could take after the wedding, once things had settled. I know you've had a hell of a year, he said on the phone. But I've seen the numbers. You've earned this. I hung up and stared at the email again, rereading the words senior consultant, like they were from a different person's life. And maybe they were. Because the version of me that had existed before Jake's betrayal, he would have tried to fix everything. To smooth things over, to make peace, even if it meant bleeding out quietly. But that version was gone. This new version had boundaries. This new version could look at his own reflection without flinching. Claire noticed the difference, too. You seem lighter, she said one evening as we packed wedding favors at the kitchen table. Like, you're not carrying so much. I looked at her, and for once, I didn't deflect. I'm finally learning how to let go of people who never cared if they hurt me. She nodded slowly. That's not easy. No, I said. But it's necessary. The day before the wedding, I drove out to the lake where I'd proposed. Just me. No phones. No distractions. I sat on the same blanket. Watched the same ripples in the water. And I pulled out a letter I'd written to Jake. I hadn't sent it. I wasn't going to. But I needed to write it. It wasn't long. Just a page. I told him that I didn't hate him. That I no longer needed him to apologize. That I saw him for who he was now, not who I'd hoped he'd be. And I told him I forgave him. But that forgiveness didn't mean access. It didn't mean trust. It didn't mean he could rewrite the past. It just meant I wasn't going to let him own any more of my mind. Then I folded the letter and threw it into the fire pit by the lake. Watched the edges curl and burn. The flame didn't roar. It just smoldered. Quiet. Steady. Like me. That night, Claire and I slept in separate rooms, per tradition. But before we parted, she kissed my forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow, we start clean." I smiled. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. And the next day, our wedding day, the sun rose over the vineyard in a sky so clear it almost felt symbolic. The chairs were set. The guests arrived. The music played. And Claire stood at the end of the aisle in a dress so simple and stunning it took the breath right out of me. Everyone rose to their feet. Except one man. One man who stood a little too quickly. Eyes wide. Hands clenched. Face pale. And that's when I knew he was here. Jake. Uninvited. Standing among the crowd like he belonged. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have prepared for, was who he was looking at. Because as Claire stepped closer, he saw her. Truly saw her. And I watched it all unfold. The shock. The recognition. The grief. The envy. The unraveling. He turned, stepped back, knocked into a chair, then turned again like he might bolt. But he didn't. Instead, he did something much worse. He snapped. Loud enough that heads turned. Loud enough that even the music faltered. And just like that, the moment I'd been preparing for finally arrived. And that's when I stepped forward and reached for the mic. There's a very specific kind of silence that falls when someone causes a scene at a wedding. It's not like the silence in a movie theater or during a funeral. No, it's sharper, more jagged. A pause where no one breathes, like even the air is confused. That's what filled the vineyard when Jake slammed his chair backward, knocking it into the guest behind him, and hissed something that I'm pretty sure was supposed to stay in his head. What the hell is she doing here? He didn't yell it. Not quite. But the venom in his voice cut through the music like a blade. Claire hadn't even reached the altar yet. She was halfway down the aisle, her hand tucked into her father's arm, when Jake's words stopped her mid-step. I turned slowly, mic already in hand. Not because I was about to give a speech, but because I had asked the band for a wireless mic earlier that morning. Just in case. Just in case this exact thing happened. Because I knew Jake couldn't help himself. He was impulsive. Predictable. The kind of person who'd try to sabotage a wedding with nothing but a wounded ego and a half-finished lie in his back pocket. And as I looked at him, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit, with that familiar flush creeping up his neck, I realized something. He hadn't changed at all. He thought he was the main character. He always did. But this time, I was the one holding the mic. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch. Let the guests murmur and shift. All eyes flicked between me, Jake, and Claire, who now stood frozen halfway down the aisle, her father looking between us like he was 2 seconds away from decking someone. Jake stepped forward, fists half clenched. You didn't tell me that she was Claire? I said calm. No, I didn't. He blinked. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You did this on purpose, he said, voice rising. You mean marrying someone I love? Yeah, that was intentional. Someone snorted. I don't know who. But it broke the tension just enough for me to catch Claire's eye. She nodded. A small one. Just enough. And then I turned back to Jake, ignoring the wedding guests, the camera guy, the stunned silence of my parents 3 rows back, and I said into the mic, let's get something clear before this day goes any further. I didn't invite you. That sparked a ripple. Heads turned. Jake tried to laugh, but it came out choked. Come on, man. Mom said. I know what Mom said. I cut in. And I said no. He stared at me like he couldn't quite believe I'd spoken back. Like I was still supposed to be the same guy from a year ago, shocked, speechless, walking out of a bedroom with a bouquet of flowers and a broken spine. But I wasn't that guy anymore. You were told not to come, I said, stepping toward him. You ignored that. You thought you'd show up, steal a few moments of attention, maybe give a surprise toast like this was your redemption arc. A few guests exchanged glances. You've been lying about this day for weeks, I continued. Telling people I asked you to be my best man. Telling them we made up. Telling them you planned the proposal. I held up a hand, which, for the record, took me 6 months of saving and 2 weeks of anxiety attacks. He didn't move. You've rewritten this entire story in your head so that you're the hero. But you're not. Not here. My voice never rose. Not once. Because this wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Jake opened his mouth again, but I beat him to it. You slept with my fiancée, I said, letting the words hang in the air. You betrayed your own brother. You stood in the house I paid for, in the bed I slept in, and acted like I didn't exist. Dead quiet now. I kept quiet about it because I was ashamed, not just of you, but of how much I let you get away with before that. I turned, looking at my parents. At how many times I cleaned up your messes, paid your rent, covered for you, took the blame, got told I was too serious when I called it out. And all of you. I swept my gaze across my parents, their cheeks flushed, eyes wide. You made me believe that loving someone meant shrinking to fit their shadow. I turned back to Jake, but I'm not doing that anymore. Security was already moving from the edge of the venue. I'd hired them to blend in, matching suits, name tags, even seating assignments. Now they moved with quiet precision, flanking Jake without touching him. This isn't your day, I said. You weren't invited. And you're not welcome. Jake laughed again, sharp and bitter. All this because I messed up once. No, I said. All this because you never learned how to stop. The guard stepped forward. Don't touch me, Jake hissed. You can walk out on your own, I said. Or you can be escorted. But either way, you're done here. For a second, I thought he might punch someone. He looked like a cornered animal, angry, confused, unsure if he should lash out or play victim. In the end, he chose neither. He just turned and shoved past the guards, muttering something under his breath, and stormed off across the grass, his shoes kicking up dust as he went. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I turned back to Claire, still standing there in white, eyes shining but steady. I'm sorry, I said into the mic, gently. Now, where were we? The guests laughed, nervous at first, then full. And just like that, the moment passed. But that wasn't the end. That was just the public curtain call. Behind the scenes, I had been preparing something far more intricate. Because you don't just stop someone like Jake with a single confrontation. You stop him by taking away the one thing he's always relied on, the benefit of the doubt. And for that, I needed receipts. You see, in the months leading up to the wedding, while Claire and I planned our life, I started gathering everything. Screenshots, text messages, bank transfers, witness statements from exes and coworkers. Years of behavior, laid out like a trail of breadcrumbs. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because Jake had built a life on the assumption that people would forget. That if he smiled wide enough, told a good enough story, no one would ask what happened behind the curtain. But now, I had the curtain in my hands. And I was ready to pull. My first call was to Matt, my cousin, the one who'd tipped me off about the best man lie. He'd always had a good head on his shoulders, and more importantly, he worked in digital marketing. He knew how to package a message. I want to release something, I told him. Not a smear campaign. Just the truth. Matt didn't even hesitate. You have proof? Plenty. Then let's do it. Together, we built a private page. Nothing public. Nothing viral. Just a password-protected link that explained everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the lies Jake had told about the wedding. We included quotes from old texts, notes from Claire's college days, even statements from people Jake had ghosted after scamming them out of money. Each one fact-checked. Each one time-stamped. It wasn't for everyone, just the family. Because after the ceremony, once the photos were taken, the cake was cut, and the guests had gone home, I sent that link to my parents, aunts, uncles, and anyone who had ever asked, "Why can't you two just move on?" And then I turned off my phone. I wasn't looking for a reaction. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. And if peace meant burning down the fantasy my family had built around Jake's golden boy image, so be it. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have planned, was what happened next. Because someone else saw that link. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Someone who had a lot more to lose than a wedding toast or a fake reconciliation. And that was when everything truly began to unravel. Because it turns out Jake's lies had gone deeper than I thought. And one of them was about to explode. I didn't expect it to go nuclear. Not really. I thought I'd send the link, my parents would see it, maybe feel a flash of shame, maybe even realize what they'd enabled all those years. I thought there'd be quiet. Some uncomfortable dinners. An apology, maybe. What I didn't count on was that my cousin Matt, ever the strategist, decided to include a tracker on the link. Nothing sketchy, just the kind that tells you who opens the page and when. Within 48 hours, it had been opened 42 times. It was shared, forwarded, and one of the people who opened it, one of the very last to click the link, was someone named Krista Mallory. The name meant nothing to me at first. I almost ignored it. Until Matt called me, voice tight with tension. "Derek," he said, "you remember how Jake used to brag about his job at that investment firm in Chicago?" "Yeah," I said. "The one he was always flying to." "Supposedly." "Well, Krista Mallory," Matt said, "is not just anyone. She's his boss." That stopped me. "Wait, what?" "Yup," he said. "Senior partner. His actual boss. She was CC'd on one of the chain forwards from your Aunt Marianne." I sat down. Hard. I think she just found out that Jake's been lying. Jake had always been vague about his job. It was his MO, buzzwords and smoke. Private equity, this, early stage funding that. Every time I asked a real question, he redirected, talked about travel, about deals that were confidential, about startup bros with too much VC money and not enough common sense. I never pressed. Why would I? Everyone around him ate it up. But now someone with actual power had seen what he was really like. I didn't hear anything for a few days. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, this is Krista Mallory from Compton and Row." The message said, voice clipped and professional. "I believe you're Derek. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your brother Jake." I didn't respond right away. I played the voicemail twice. Then a third time. Claire found me pacing in the backyard, phone in hand, muttering under my breath. "What's going on?" she asked. And so I told her. She just nodded, calm as ever, and said, "Call her back. If she's asking questions, she's already suspicious. You won't be telling her anything she hasn't already started to guess." So I did. Krista was polite. Cold, but not unkind. She didn't ask emotional questions. Just facts. Dates. Confirmations. Do you know if Jake ever attended the University of Chicago MBA program? No, I said. He dropped out of undergrad. Twice. A pause. I see. And his work at the Tech Bridge Accelerator. Do you have any record of it? I snorted. It was fake. He told our family he was working there when he was actually living with a girl in Portland and selling crypto consultations online. Another pause. I thought so. Turns out Jake had built an entire professional identity on paper-thin lies. Fake internships, padded resumes, degrees he never earned. He didn't just exaggerate, he fabricated. And he had somehow passed through enough cracks to land a job at a legitimate firm. One that never fully verified his background because, well, Jake was Jake. Charming, confident, a smooth talker with a decent suit and just enough buzzwords to sound legit. But in finance, that only works until it doesn't. I didn't ask what happened after our call. I didn't have to. A week later, my parents called me. Both of them. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Derek, my mom said, voice pinched and small. Jake's been fired. I didn't say anything. She filled the silence like she always did. Apparently, someone at the firm got a hold of those things you sent around. That website. That wasn't meant for them, I said flatly. It was for family. Well, they saw it, she snapped. And now your brother has no job. No savings. Nothing. My dad took over. He's saying you set him up. I laughed. He set himself up. I just stopped covering for him. Silence again. Then my mom said, we were hoping you could. No. I didn't need to hear the rest. They were hoping I could help him. Bail him out. Offer him a place to stay. Write a check. Something. But I was done being his safety net. I was done playing the backup plan. I hung up. Later that week, Matt called me again. You're not going to believe this, he said. I braced myself. Jake's ex, the one from Portland? She found the site too. Messaged me through the contact form. What did she say? She said she always had a feeling he was conning people. He owed her $3,000. Disappeared overnight. She's building a small claims case. By the end of the month, I'd heard from 2 more people. One was a guy who'd hired Jake for a bogus startup coaching package and never got what he paid for. The other was a woman who'd been dating Jake long distance. At the same time, he was still texting Hannah. He was unraveling. Claire and I didn't celebrate. Not openly. We just kept living. Happily. Quietly. I took the promotion. We moved into a place with a view of the mountains. Claire expanded her bakery into a second location. And I started writing again. Just small stuff. Journaling. Some essays. A piece about boundaries that a local blog ended up publishing. I never heard from Jake again. But I did get one last email from my mom. No greeting. Just a wall of text. It was angry. Bitter. She accused me of destroying the family. Of humiliating Jake. Of weaponizing the truth to make myself feel better. And then, buried in the last paragraph, was this sentence. You always had to be the good one. As if that was a bad thing. As if doing the right thing, after years of being quiet, was somehow worse than lying to everyone who ever trusted you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because by then, the people who mattered knew the truth. Our wedding photo now hangs in the hallway. Claire, glowing in her dress. Me, smiling like I've never smiled before. Not because Jake wasn't there, but because, for the first time in my life, neither was his shadow. My name's Elias, I'm 32, and I've always been the dependable one in the family. The quiet type. Not invisible, exactly, but certainly not front and center. While my brother Ryan lit up rooms with his booming laugh and magnetic charm, I was the guy making sure the lights stayed on. You know the type. The one who remembers anniversaries, buys thoughtful gifts, handles emergencies without making a scene. I don't resent it. It's just the role I slid into. Or maybe the one that was handed to me when no one else wanted it. Ryan and I were never close. Not in the bitter, shouting match kind of way, just distant. He was the golden boy growing up, always the center of attention. Star quarterback, homecoming king, the whole package. I was the academic one, the quiet achiever. Our parents loved us both, sure, but it was obvious who they admired. And I learned early on that it was easier not to compete. So I supported him. Clapped the loudest at his games. Helped him cram the night before finals. Let him borrow my car when his was in the shop. That sort of thing. When he got engaged to Haley, I didn't expect to be the best man. I didn't even expect to be in the wedding party. I'd met her a handful of times, enough to know she was sharp, confident, and cared deeply about image. She had a way of scanning a room that made you feel like she was rating everything: the table settings, your shoes, the way you held your glass. I got the sense she tolerated me more than liked me. Still, when Ryan called me last year and said, "Hey man, I know you're not big on crowds, but I'd love for you to help with the wedding," I smiled and said, "Of course." I figured he meant logistics. I'm good at that. What I didn't realize was that help meant handling the entire catering contract. They were having this swanky, 200-guest wedding at a vineyard 2 hours out of town. Expensive. Picturesque. They wanted a plated dinner with 3 options: passed hors d'oeuvres during cocktail hour, signature drinks, the whole 9 yards. Ryan explained they were tight on funds but wanted it to be perfect. Could I handle the down payment for now and they'd reimburse me after the honeymoon? I agreed. Stupidly, maybe. But again, I've always been the reliable one. I've done well in my field, software consulting, and didn't think twice about floating the $8,000 deposit. I even coordinated with the caterers directly, arranged the menu tastings, managed the timelines, and signed the service contract in my name. It wasn't just a financial favor. It was a trust thing. And I was proud to help. The lead up to the wedding was chaotic, as weddings always are. Group chats exploded. Haley had a vision board. Ryan kept accidentally forwarding me tasks like arranging shuttle buses and coordinating with the florist. It became a running joke among my friends that I was the unofficial wedding planner. I brushed it off. After all, it was family. But then things started to shift. Subtly at first. The wedding website went live, and I noticed I wasn't listed in the wedding party. Fine. Not a big deal. Then came the seating chart, which I saw during a planning dinner. My name was slotted at table 17, right next to the exit, grouped with a couple of Ryan's college friends I'd never met. When I gently asked Haley if there'd been a mistake, she gave me this tight-lipped smile and said, "Oh, we just figured you'd prefer something low-key. Didn't want to overwhelm you with too much attention." That stung more than I expected. But I told myself not to take it personally. It was their day. I'd handled the logistics. I didn't need fanfare. I was here to support, not be celebrated. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was held at this sleek rooftop venue overlooking the skyline, with string lights and live acoustic music. Everyone was dressed to the nines. There was a slideshow playing on a loop, a montage of childhood photos, vacation memories, clips of Ryan proposing at the beach. I sat through 20 solid minutes of curated nostalgia before I realized I wasn't in a single frame. Not one. Not even the group family shots. My mom leaned over at one point and said, "Isn't this beautiful?" Haley did such a great job with the photos. I forced a smile and nodded. But inside, something started to crack. Then came the speeches. Haley's dad gave a long toast about her resilience, her grace, her leadership. Ryan's best man, his old college roommate, told stories about frat parties and late-night cramming. My name didn't come up once. And when it was Haley's turn to speak, she raised her glass and said, "To everyone who shaped who we are today. The people who lifted us, challenged us, and made us feel like main characters in our own lives." A few people clapped. I didn't. After dinner, I caught Ryan by the bar. "Hey," I said casually, "I noticed I wasn't in the slideshow. Was that intentional?" He looked sheepish. "Oh, man. I think Haley put that together with her cousin. They just picked the highlights, you know? No offense." I nodded slowly. "And the seating chart?" Ryan hesitated. "Haley's idea. She said you're not big on crowds. Wanted to give you space." It was such a pat answer. So rehearsed. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't just overlooked, I was deliberately excluded, pushed to the margins. The day of the wedding arrived, and the venue was stunning. Picture-perfect weather, rolling hills in the background, violinists playing under a canopy of ivy. Guests sipped cocktails and took selfies in front of a flower arch. I helped coordinate the catering staff as they set up, wearing my nicest suit, trying to stay invisible. Just a background character, right? During the ceremony, I sat quietly in my seat by the exit, watching my parents beam with pride, my brother choke up as Haley walked down the aisle. It should have been a beautiful moment, but I felt numb, like I was watching strangers. The final straw came during the reception. After the couple's first dance, Haley and Ryan made another round of speeches, thanking guests, acknowledging their families. "We're so lucky to have such supportive parents, incredible friends," Haley said, voice sweet and confident. "And of course, to everyone who helped bring this vision to life, you know who you are." No eye contact. Not even a glance in my direction. I was mid-sip of my drink when I finally stood up and walked over. I waited until there was a lull in the applause, then approached Haley at the head table. I kept my tone light. Hey, can I ask you something? She turned, a little surprised. Sure. I smiled politely, just wondering why I wasn't in the slideshow, the speech, or even the family photo earlier. Haley tilted her head, and then she did something I'll never forget. She smirked. That smug, satisfied little curve of her lips. Honestly, she said, eyes flicking down my suit like it barely registered. We didn't want background characters in our memories. I just stared at her. The room felt very quiet, though I'm sure it wasn't. Somewhere behind me, a fork clinked against a glass, but I was too busy replaying that sentence in my head. Background character. I nodded once. No anger. No scene. Just a quiet, measured step back. Then I returned to my table, pulled out my phone, and opened the email chain with the caterers. The final payment, $11,000, was scheduled to process at 5 p.m. I clicked cancel. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I tapped yes. The timestamp was 4:56 p.m. And then I sat back, folded my hands, and waited. I watched the party unfold like a detached observer in a dream. Laughter echoed off the vineyard walls. The DJ transitioned from soft background jazz to the first real dance set of the night, and guests started to loosen up. Haley was twirling in her custom lace gown, Ryan grinning ear to ear, drinks flowing like liquid gold. No one noticed anything amiss at first. Why would they? The appetizers had made their rounds during cocktail hour. Everyone was buzzing from champagne and filtered sunlight. But then, something shifted. At exactly 5:23 p.m., I saw the catering staff slow down. One server walked briskly toward the head coordinator with a furrowed brow. Another checked a clipboard, lips pressed into a line. They began whispering near the kitchen door, 2, then 3, then 5 of them. I could see the confusion ripple outward like a stone dropped into still water. The head planner, a woman named Corinne who had coordinated over email with me a dozen times, made her way across the courtyard. Her heels clicked urgently against the flagstone as she approached the head table. She leaned down to Haley and Ryan, whispering discreetly but clearly with tension in her voice. Haley's smile faltered. Ryan blinked, then frowned. I watched him glance toward the catering tent, then toward me. Not accusatory yet, just puzzled, still trying to process. I sipped my drink. Corinne straightened up, her face now visibly flushed, and headed back toward the kitchen. Meanwhile, servers began quietly removing the plated silver chargers from the empty dinner tables. No main courses had been served yet. They were supposed to start the plated service at 5:30 sharp, beginning with the head table. But now the silverware was being collected, one table at a time, like a slow unraveling thread in the middle of a wedding tapestry. A few guests began to notice. Murmurs started. Are we not eating? I thought dinner was next. Maybe they're running behind. The DJ, oblivious, played on. Haley stood abruptly, her pristine dress shifting like water as she walked with purpose toward the catering tent. She passed by me without a glance, which was fine. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. Not yet. Ryan followed her, less composed. I could tell from the stiffness in his shoulders that the mask was cracking. 5 minutes later, they returned, Haley red-faced, Ryan stone-silent. A waiter followed behind them with bottled water and nothing else. And that's when it happened. One of Ryan's groomsmen, probably a little too buzzed for tact, laughed and said, "Wait, was dinner canceled?" He was joking, of course. But when Haley spun around and snapped, "We're handling it," the entire table went silent. The murmurs spread like wildfire. I caught snippets, guests asking each other if they should leave, if this was some kind of delay, or if they'd missed dinner altogether. Someone asked if they could order DoorDash. Another joked about whether the open bar would survive the stampede if food wasn't coming. I stayed seated, calmly nursing my second glass of a drink. I wasn't hungry anymore. Haley and Ryan huddled again with Corinne. She was trying to call someone. I assumed the catering owner, but I already knew how this played out. The contract was in my name. The deposit was paid months ago, but the remaining balance, necessary to continue service, had been stopped just before the food was plated. The kitchen had likely prepped it all, ready to go, but without the payment, they weren't delivering a thing. And since the venue didn't allow outside food service unless previously approved, Haley had no options. At around 6:05 p.m., Ryan made his way to my table. I could feel the shift in the air as he approached. His jaw was tight, eyes stormy but confused, like he still hadn't decided whether I was a villain or just a variable in a wedding spiraling out of control. "Hey," he said, low. I turned to him, not unkindly. "Hey, did you cancel the catering payment?" I took a long breath. "Yes." There was a pause. Just a heartbeat. Why? I looked up at him. Not with anger. Not even resentment. Just clarity. Because your wife told me I was a background character in your memories. And I realized I've been paying to stay in a story I was never really a part of. He didn't speak. I added, you asked me to help. I did. I've helped with everything. Quietly. Without complaint. But if I'm just set dressing to be placed near the exit, if I don't even deserve a line in the credits, then no. I'm not funding your fairy tale anymore. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, glancing around. You could have just told me. I raised my eyebrows. Would you have heard me over the applause? There was no comeback for that. Not a real one. He just stared at me, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Then he turned and walked back to the head table, where Haley was visibly fuming. Guests were checking their watches. A few were gathering their things. The spell was breaking, and no one could quite figure out why the magic had stopped. But I could. I stood up, buttoned my blazer, and slipped out quietly. No scene, no drama. Just the background character fading to black. And as I walked toward the parking lot, I heard one of the servers explaining politely to a guest, I'm so sorry, ma'am. Unfortunately, we've been asked to pause all service due to non-payment. The guest gasped. What? But who? And I smiled, just a little, as I stepped into the evening air. By the time I reached my car, twilight had started to settle in. The vineyard lights twinkled behind me like distant stars, beautiful, untouchable, and no longer my concern. I didn't drive away right away. I sat there for a minute in the driver's seat, engine off, hands loose on the wheel, listening to the muffled chaos drifting over from the courtyard. It was surreal, honestly. A wedding unraveling in real time, not because of some natural disaster or scandal, but because I'd quietly stopped holding everything together. And for once, I wasn't rushing in to fix it. My phone buzzed. First, it was a text from Ryan. Elias. Please. Just call me. I stared at it. Then another from my mother. Did something happen? Haley says you sabotaged the reception. Tell me that's not true. No. Are you okay? No. What happened? Just straight to accusation. Classic. And then, a third, this one from Dad. You need to apologize to your brother. Fix this before the guests leave. We're humiliated. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I turned my phone on silent and slid it into the glove box. I wasn't ready for their side of the story yet. I was still sitting with mine. I ended up driving back to the inn I'd booked for the weekend, not the fancy on-site lodge where most of the wedding party was staying, but a quiet little bed and breakfast about 10 minutes down the road. I'd picked it originally because it was cheap and tucked away, but now it felt like the smartest decision I'd made all month. When I got there, the innkeeper offered me a glass of port and asked how the wedding had gone. I gave a small laugh and said, eventful. I didn't go into details. Just sat in the cozy lounge, sipping my drink while the fireplace crackled, and let the weight of everything start to lift. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the start of it. The next morning, I woke to a full inbox. 26 messages. Most of them from family. Some from guests. A few from numbers I didn't even recognize. I opened one from my cousin Jess. Okay, what happened? 1 minute we were drinking sangria. Next minute no food, Haley in full meltdown mode. And then someone said you walked out. Did you seriously pull the plug? Because, low-key, that was kind of iconic. I smirked at that. Jess had always been one of the few family members who got it, who saw how often I played the role of the invisible support beam while Ryan basked in the spotlight. She wasn't mocking me. She was impressed. Maybe even proud. But not everyone felt that way. By 11 a.m., I'd gotten voicemails from my aunt, my mom again, Ryan, twice, and Haley's mother. That one was particularly venomous. Elias, I don't know what kind of personal grudge you're holding on to, but you ruined the most important day of my daughter's life. She was devastated. This was her dream wedding, and you made a mockery of it. Right. Because nothing says dream wedding like humiliating your future husband's brother and treating him like a second-class guest at his own family's table. Still, I was beginning to feel the weight of it all again. The guilt. The whispers of doubt. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have waited until after the event. Maybe I should have just let it slide. But every time those thoughts started to creep in, I heard her voice again, crystal clear in my memory. We didn't want background characters in our memories. And it all came rushing back. This wasn't just about a slideshow or a speech. It was about a lifetime of being quietly dismissed, of being useful but not cherished, needed but not valued, of being the safety net that everyone forgot to thank as they walked the tightrope. Late that afternoon, Ryan showed up at the inn. I wasn't expecting him. I told no one where I was staying, but Jess must have mentioned it to someone, or maybe he just called around. Either way, I looked up from my seat in the garden when I saw him walk through the gate, suit wrinkled, tie gone, dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired. "Elias," he said, stopping a few feet away. I nodded. "Ryan." There was a long silence. Then he sat down on the bench across from me and said, "I don't even know where to start." I waited. Let him fumble. "You really canceled the payment?" I nodded. He ran a hand through his hair. "People left hungry. Some didn't even stay for the cake. Haley's parents are furious. Her aunt flew in from Florida. It was a disaster." I didn't respond. She cried all night. Still, I said nothing. Finally, he looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. And he asked, "Why?" I took a deep breath. "Because for once, I wanted you to feel what it's like when I stop holding everything up. When I stop doing the invisible work. When I stop pretending I'm okay with being erased." He didn't say anything. So I kept going. "I've never asked for the spotlight, Ryan. Never tried to outshine you. But I've been there. Every time. Every call, every bill, every crisis. And I never complained. But your wedding? That was the first time I felt like I didn't just not matter. I wasn't even welcome to exist in your story." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't know Haley said that to you. Would it have mattered?" He paused. Then, softly, "I don't know." There it was. Honest, at least. I let that hang in the air between us for a while. The wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, but not unbearable. Eventually, he asked, "Can we fix this?" I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the balance of power shift. Not in a cruel way. Not out of revenge. Just equal footing. Something we'd never had before. And I said, "That depends on what you're actually trying to fix." Ryan didn't reply immediately. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the gravel path like it might spell out the answer for him. I didn't rush him. For once, I didn't feel obligated to fill the silence, smooth things over, or cushion the blow. I'd spent years doing that, making everything easier for everyone else. It felt foreign, almost luxurious, to just wait. Eventually, he sighed and said, "I think I've spent so long being the center of attention that I forgot what it meant to actually see the people around me." I didn't respond. I wanted to see if he'd keep going. He did. "I mean, when we were kids, you were always just there. The one who fixed things. Handed me tools when I didn't know what I was doing, bailed me out when I blew my allowance, helped me pass econ. I guess I started treating that like a given." He looked up at me, eyes rimmed with tiredness. I didn't realize how much I was taking. He was trying. I'll give him that. But I could still see the edge of discomfort in him, like he was struggling to accept that the world didn't just revolve around him now that someone had finally said no. "Haley's not a bad person," he added. I didn't flinch, but I felt the twitch of resentment bubble up. I kept my tone even. "She didn't just forget me. She erased me. Intentionally." Ryan winced. "I know. I talked to her about it last night. She didn't handle it well." "Ryan," I said quietly, "she called me a background character to my face. That wasn't a joke. That was how she sees me. How a lot of people in this family see me." He didn't deny it. Just lowered his gaze again. "I've always accepted scraps of gratitude because I thought that's what being the good son was about. But this time, you stood by while she humiliated me in front of 100 people. And the only time you said anything is now that it's affecting you." He blinked, and for a second, I thought he was going to push back. But instead, he just nodded slowly, like the weight of that truth was finally settling on his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said. Quiet. Real. I let it sit for a beat before nodding. "Thank you." We sat in silence for a while after that. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. Just honest. Uneasy, but needed. A kind of reckoning that had been 2 decades overdue. Eventually, Ryan stood up. "We'll pay you back for the catering. I promise." I shrugged. "It's not about the money. I canceled the payment because I needed you to feel what it's like when I'm not quietly absorbing the hits. You don't need to pay me back. But I also don't owe you more than that." He hesitated, like he wanted to argue, but instead he nodded again, then offered a hand. I stood and shook it, feeling the weight of 1,000 unsaid things in the grip. Then he left. The next few weeks were revealing. I didn't hear from Haley, which didn't surprise me. From what I gathered, she and Ryan had a massive fight the day after the wedding. Apparently, her parents blamed him for letting the catering disaster happen, and her aunt, The one who flew in from Florida publicly called the event a glorified cocktail hour with dresses. Ouch. They postponed their honeymoon. Cited stress. Family drama. Whatever excuse played best on Instagram, I guess. Their post changed tone, less perfect couple, more humbled by life's challenges. I noticed Haley scrubbed a few of her pre-wedding reels that included clips of the slideshow. Guess the backlash got to her, or maybe someone pointed out how pointed the omission had been. What had surprised me, though, was the response from the rest of the family. My mom texted me the next day with a half-hearted, "We should talk." I ignored it. 2 days later, she called. I let it ring. Then she emailed. Said she'd had no idea how excluded I felt, and that, of course, I was valued. But you know what? I didn't respond. Because I realized something important. The people who genuinely care don't wait until a scene is made. They don't need an empty banquet hall to realize they left someone out. And I was done playing the game where I had to scream to be seen. Dad eventually called too. He was more direct, more uncomfortable. Said he didn't condone what Haley said, but that I shouldn't have made such a public statement. I told him, "Dad, the most public statement was them erasing me from every part of the wedding and pretending it was fine. I just held up a mirror." He didn't like that, but he didn't argue. What surprised me most was the number of guests who reached out. Some messaged me on Facebook. Some emailed me directly. Jess even forwarded me a group text from a few of the cousins saying, honestly, Elias was the only one keeping that event together. Haley owes him a speech. One guy, a friend of Ryan's I'd met once at a birthday dinner, sent me a message that just said, "I'd have paid you to cater my wedding if I knew you had the stones to pull off what you did." That one made me laugh. Eventually, I got dinner with Jess. She raised a glass to me and said, "Here's to the background character who finally flipped the script." I clinked her glass. Here's to never being in the background again. A few months later, Ryan emailed me a scanned copy of a check. Full reimbursement for the deposit I'd paid. I told him again, I didn't need it. But he insisted. So I donated it. Quietly. Anonymously. To a local food pantry in our hometown. The same one our mom used to volunteer at when we were kids. I didn't post about it. Didn't brag. Just figured if that money couldn't feed wedding guests, maybe it could feed someone who'd actually appreciate it. No? I keep my distance. Not in a dramatic way, just intentionally. I don't show up out of obligation anymore. I don't let guilt dictate my calendar. I still love my family, but I'm finally loving myself more. And that means setting boundaries. Saying no. Knowing my worth. A few weeks ago, I got a wedding invite in the mail. From another cousin. The RSVP card had options for will attend, will not attend, and one that said, only attending if Elias is catering, winky face, in tiny handwriting someone had clearly added later. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Because somewhere between being the forgotten brother and the guy who canceled dinner mid-wedding, I became a story. A legend, even. Not bad for a background character. Not bad at all. My name's Jake, I'm 28, and I used to think Sunday dinners with my family were something sacred, a way to keep us all connected. It was the one tradition that had somehow survived through all the arguing, passive-aggressive comments, and subtle jabs over the years. We'd gather at my parents' house, eat roast chicken or lasagna, and pretend we were all on the same page. But last night, halfway through dessert, I realized I'd been looking at it all wrong. We were halfway through my mom's apple pie when my dad set his fork down, leaned back, and said in the most casual voice I've ever heard, "So, your sister will be moving into your apartment for the next few months." It took me a full 5 seconds to process what he'd just said. I looked up, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke. But no, my mom just nodded, smiling like this was some sort of generous family decision, not a complete invasion of my privacy. Before I could even respond, my older brother smirked and added, "You can crash on our couch like a guest. Don't worry, we'll make some space." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like this was some normal arrangement. My sister, sitting there with her phone in one hand and a smug look on her face, didn't even acknowledge me. She just shrugged and said, "It's only temporary, Jake. Stop acting like you own the place." That's when I realized they weren't asking. They were telling me. I kept my face neutral, kept chewing my pie, but inside my head was spinning. I'd worked years to afford that apartment, paid every bill myself, decorated it myself, and made it my safe space away from all of this. And they were just deciding to move her in like I was a spare key holder, not the actual tenant. I glanced around the table, half expecting someone to step in and say it was a bit much. But no one did. Not my dad, not my mom, not even my brother, who was now clearly enjoying my silence. It was like they were all waiting for me to argue so they could tell me I was being selfish. Instead, I just nodded slowly and kept eating. Because 2 weeks ago, I'd already signed the papers for a new place. And this time, it wasn't just any place. It was somewhere they wouldn't dare step foot in, even if they could afford it. The following week, I started noticing how quickly my family moved from "this is happening" to "this has already happened." It was like the conversation at dinner had flipped a switch in their heads, and my apartment was no longer mine. It was just the place where Emily will stay for a while. My mom started texting me constantly, asking for little details she could have easily looked up herself. "What's the Wi-Fi password again? Emily will need it. Do you still have clean sheets for the guest bed? Don't buy new ones. She's fine with whatever you have. Oh, and do you still have that desk in the corner? Emily will need a space to work from home. So if you could clear that off before next weekend." I stared at the last one for a full minute before locking my phone and walking away. Clear it off? Like my own workspace was just some pile of clutter to be cleared out for her convenience? I decided not to reply. 2 days later, I came home from work and found my brother's car parked outside my building. I knew that car anywhere. He's always bragging about how he bought it himself, conveniently leaving out that my parents co-signed the loan. Sure enough, he was inside my apartment, lounging on my couch with his shoes kicked off. "Dude," he said when I walked in, like we were just two buddies hanging out. "Your spare key was still in the same spot. You should really hide that better. Anyone could get in." I didn't even sit down. "What are you doing here, Matt?" "Just checking out the place, seeing how much space Em's gonna have. Mom wanted me to make sure there's room for her stuff." I blinked at him. "You couldn't text me first?" He shrugged, grinning. "Relax. We're family. You act like I broke in or something." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, jaw tight, until he finally got up and grabbed his jacket. On his way out, he glanced around the living room and said, "You might want to move your gaming setup into storage. Emily's not going to want that taking up space." Then he left. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, fighting the urge to scream into my pillow. It wasn't just the intrusion, it was the assumption. The way they all just decided that my life could be put on hold so my sister could have a convenient crash pad. I remembered every time growing up when something of mine became community property. The video game console I saved for months to buy, suddenly in my brother's room because he uses it more. The car I bought in college, mysteriously disappearing for weekends because Emily really needed to get to her friend's house. And every single time I protested, I was met with the same tired lecture. "Family shares, Jake. Stop being selfish." Except sharing never went both ways. 3 days later, Mom called me while I was at work. "Hey, sweetheart. Just a heads up, your sister will be coming by with Dad on Saturday to drop off a few things. You'll be home, right?" "I work Saturdays," I said flatly. "Oh, that's fine. Just leave the key under the mat like you used to. We'll get everything set up." I felt my stomach twist. "Mom, you can't just..." She cut me off with a bright laugh. "Jake, stop worrying. It's not a big deal. She'll barely take up any space. And it's only temporary. Only temporary." Those words rang in my head for the rest of the day. When Saturday rolled around, I did not leave a key under the mat. Instead, I stayed home, sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, waiting. Sure enough, I heard the knock right on time. "Jake? You there?" my dad's voice called. I opened the door and stepped aside, letting them in. My sister breezed past me without so much as a hello, dragging a suitcase behind her. My dad followed with a box in his arms, nodding at me like we were business partners. "We'll just put these in the guest room," he said. "It's not a guest room," I replied, my voice calm but sharp. "It's my office." My sister rolled her eyes. "Not anymore." I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching as they unloaded more boxes from the car. Clothes, makeup bags, a full-length mirror. By the time they were done, half my office looked like a department store clearance section. My dad patted me on the shoulder as he left. "Thanks for being so understanding, son. You're doing the right thing." I didn't reply. I just closed the door behind them and stared at the room that used to be mine. That night, I got a text from Matt. "Mom says thanks for cooperating. Em says she's moving in officially next Friday. Don't worry, I'll help you get your stuff out." Get my stuff out. I read that message 3 times before setting my phone down. My hands were shaking, Not with fear, but with a strange kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. Because while they were all so busy planning how to rearrange my life, I was already 3 steps ahead of them. By the time the next Friday rolled around, I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't actually go through with it. That some part of them would realize how insane this was and back off. I left work early that day, just in case, and when I pulled into the parking lot, I knew something was wrong before I even unlocked the door. My blinds were open. I never leave my blinds open. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and felt my heart drop. The place looked completely different. My office wasn't my office anymore. My desk had been shoved into the living room, half disassembled, with my monitor leaning against the wall. My bookshelf was empty, all my books and papers stuffed into cardboard boxes that hadn't been there that morning. And standing right in the middle of it all was my sister, humming to herself as she taped up another box. "Oh, you're early," she said, as if I was the one intruding. "We decided it'd be easier to just get this over with before you got home." I just stared at her. "You what?" "Matt had the spare key, so we let ourselves in," she said casually, as if breaking into my home was just another Friday afternoon chore. "Don't worry, we didn't touch your room. We just needed to clear space so I can start moving my stuff in this weekend." I felt the blood rush to my face. "You touched all of this without asking me." She sighed dramatically, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Jake, it's not a big deal. Mom said you'd be fine with it. Besides, I'm going to need this space more than you. You can work from the couch for a while. It's not the end of the world." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my mom. "Glad Emily got a head start. We'll bring the rest of her things tomorrow morning. Jake, could you grab some groceries tonight? She's vegetarian, so make sure you get the right stuff." The right stuff. I walked into the kitchen, trying to calm down, but it was like everywhere I looked I saw another sign of how far this had gone. My coffee mugs were stacked differently. My fridge had new containers inside it, labeled with my sister's name. She had actually rearranged my fridge like she was the one paying rent. And then I saw it. On the counter was a small stack of envelopes, mail I hadn't opened yet. One of them was slit open. I grabbed it, and my stomach dropped when I saw what it was, a bank statement. "You opened my mail?" She didn't even flinch. "Relax. Mom told me to check if you'd paid the utility bill on time, because we didn't want to move me in if the power was about to get shut off or something." Something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, very quietly, "Get out." She laughed. "What? Get out?" Her laugh faltered. "Jake, stop being dramatic." I stepped closer, and for the first time in years, I think she realized I wasn't bluffing. "This is my home. You don't touch my things, you don't open my mail, and you do not walk in here with a spare key like you own the place. Get out. Now." For a moment, there was silence. Then she rolled her eyes, grabbed her purse, and said, "Fine. But Mom and Dad will hear about this." She slammed the door behind her. Not even 15 minutes later, my phone started blowing up. First Mom. "Jake, what on earth did you say to your sister? She's crying in the car right now." Then Dad. "You need to get over yourself. She's your sister, and she needs a place to stay. You're acting like a selfish brat." And then Matt. "Nice job, man. You made Mom cry. Hope you're proud." I didn't answer any of them. I just sat on the couch, staring at the boxes of my things that they had packed up without permission. My home suddenly didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my sister's face, heard her laughing as she taped up my life and shoved it into boxes. By morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper, something colder. I stopped by a hardware store on my way home from work that evening and bought a new deadbolt. By midnight, the spare key that Matt had used so casually was officially useless. But I didn't tell them that. Instead, I waited. And when Saturday morning came, and they all showed up at my door with boxes and bags and plans for Emily's new room, they found themselves standing in the hallway knocking on a door that wasn't going to open. And I stayed very, very quiet. I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, phone buzzing on the table, and waited until the knocking stopped and the angry texts started pouring in. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. By Saturday night, my phone was a war zone. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, Matt, even a few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably my sister's friends, who had been drafted to help her move in. The group chat was a mess of messages, each one nastier than the last. Unbelievable. You've always been difficult, but this takes the cake. You're abandoning your family when they need you. You know mom's blood pressure goes up when she's stressed, right? Hope you're happy. The one that got me the most was from my dad. You better think long and hard about what you're doing. Family doesn't turn its back on family. If you lock her out again tomorrow, you're not welcome at the house. Not welcome at the house. I just stared at those words until they blurred on my screen. It was one of those sentences that felt heavier than it should, like it was dragging years of history along with it. I'd been welcome my entire life, but only on their terms. I was welcome as long as I agreed to babysit, lend money, fix things, give rides, and generally make my siblings' lives easier. I was welcome as long as I never said no. But the moment I drew a line, suddenly I wasn't welcome at all. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off my phone, left it on the kitchen counter, and went for a walk around the block. It was a quiet night, the kind of night where you can hear your own footsteps echo. For the first time in a long time, I let myself really think about what I wanted. Not what they wanted, not what they expected, not what would keep the peace. And what I wanted was peace. I wanted to live in a space where I didn't have to look over my shoulder, wondering if someone had gone through my mail, or opened my fridge, or packed up my books without asking. I wanted to stop feeling like a guest in my own home. By the time I got back, I'd made up my mind. I spent the rest of the night quietly going through my things, not packing them this time, just taking inventory, sorting what I wanted to take with me, what I wanted to donate, what I wouldn't mind leaving behind. It was almost soothing, like I was reclaiming each item one by one. This is mine. This stays with me. This I can let go of. I stayed up until 3 a.m., moving from room to room, a kind of calm determination settling over me. The apartment was a mess of piles and open boxes by the time I collapsed into bed, but for the first time in days, I slept through the night. Sunday morning came with more banging on my door, louder this time. "Jake, open up." My mom's voice. I stayed still. "I know you're in there. This is ridiculous." When I didn't answer, she switched tactics. "You're being cruel, Jake. Your sister's in tears. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." That part stung, not because I believed it, but because I knew how good they were at making me feel guilty. Emily had options. She had 2 sets of grandparents who adored her, half a dozen friends with couches, and a boyfriend who, as far as I knew, had his own apartment. But none of that mattered. My place was the most convenient, so in their minds, it was the only option. After a few more minutes of yelling, the voices faded. A while later, I heard a car door slam and tires squeal out of the parking lot. I spent the rest of Sunday in near silence. No TV, no music, just the sound of me taping up boxes and stacking them by the door. On Monday morning, I put in for a few days off work and drove straight to the leasing office. The property manager looked surprised when I told her I wanted to terminate my lease early, but she didn't ask questions once I handed her the fee. "Do you have a new place lined up?" she asked. I smiled for the first time in days. "Yeah, I do." The papers I'd signed 2 weeks earlier were already burning a hole in my bag. That afternoon, I rented a storage unit across town and started ferrying my things over in small trips. Desk first, then books, then kitchen items. I did it all quietly, methodically, like I was erasing my life from this place one carload at a time. I didn't tell a soul. By Wednesday, the apartment was starting to look empty. If my family showed up unannounced again, they'd notice, but part of me almost wanted them to. That night, I got another message from my dad. "Final chance to do the right thing. We're coming by on Saturday morning. Either let your sister in, or we'll take matters into our own hands." Take matters into our own hands. I stared at that sentence for a long time, feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. Because it meant they were going to cross a line, and once they did, there would be no coming back. And I was ready for that. By Thursday morning, something inside me had shifted. The sadness and guilt that had been eating at me since this whole thing started were gone, replaced by a kind of calm clarity. It was like I had finally stopped trying to make them happy and started thinking about what would make me happy. I woke up early, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open. The apartment was half empty now, my desk gone, bookshelves cleared, and instead of feeling depressing, it felt liberating. Every bare wall was a reminder that I was leaving this behind, that I was building something new for myself. At noon, I drove across town to my new place. The first time I'd seen it, 2 weeks ago, I knew it was perfect. Bigger than my current apartment, in a better neighborhood, with a building security system that would make it impossible for anyone to just waltz in. No spare key hidden under the mat. No shared walls with nosy neighbors who might let someone in just because they're family. When I stepped inside, the smell of fresh paint hit me. The movers had already delivered my new couch and dining table, both of which I'd saved up for over months. I ran my hand along the countertop, picturing what it would be like to come home here after work. No surprise guests, no boxes taped shut without my consent, no one telling me where I could and couldn't sit. I set my bag down and just stood there for a minute, taking it all in. This was mine. The next few days became a blur of activity. During the day, I worked on getting the new place set up, curtains, furniture, kitchen supplies, and at night, I returned to my old apartment to load my car with whatever was left. I didn't rush. I took my time, savoring the process of reclaiming every last item. One night, as I was packing up my game console, I found myself smiling. A few years ago, my brother had borrowed this exact console and kept it for almost a year before I finally got it back. Now it was going into a place where no one would touch it unless I said they could. By Friday, my old apartment was nearly empty except for a few pieces of furniture I didn't care about. I left them there deliberately. Let them try to move in now. There was nothing left worth taking. That evening, I stood in my new living room with a pizza box on the counter and the city lights shining through the window. I hadn't told anyone about the move, not even my closest friend, because I wanted this to be mine first. For the first time in weeks, I felt light, free. But the texts from my family didn't stop. Saturday morning, right on schedule, the barrage began. Be there in 10. Hope you've come to your senses. Don't make this worse than it has to be. I didn't reply. I drove over to the old apartment just to watch from the parking lot. Sure enough, my parents' car pulled up, followed by Matt's truck. I stayed far enough back that they couldn't see me, just close enough to watch them march up to the door. When they realized the locks had been changed, I saw my dad's shoulders tense. Matt tried the spare key 3 times before hurling it onto the ground. Then came the knocking, loud, insistent, relentless. I didn't move. I just sat there in my car, sipping coffee, and watched as the frustration built. After about 15 minutes, my mom tried calling me. I let it ring out. Eventually, they left, but not before taping a handwritten note to the door. When I walked up later to see what it said, I had to laugh. Jake, you forced our hand. If you're not here by tonight to let Emily in, we're calling the landlord. This is bigger than you. It's about family. Family. I took a photo of the note, peeled it off the door, and crumpled it into my pocket. Because by that point, it wasn't my problem anymore. I drove straight to my new place, where my desk was already set up, my fridge was fully stocked, and my walls were exactly how I wanted them. No one had touched anything. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control. Over the next week, I settled into my new routine. Work, gym, home. Quiet mornings with coffee, quiet nights with movies or music. I even started seeing some old friends again. People I hadn't hung out with in ages because every free weekend used to be consumed by family obligations. I didn't tell my family where I was living. When they texted, I replied less and less, until eventually I stopped answering entirely. At first, there was anger. You're being ridiculous. You're tearing this family apart. If something happens to Emily because of you, that's on your conscience. Then came the guilt. Mom hasn't been sleeping. Is that what you wanted? Your dad's been stressed about this for days. And finally, the silence. By the end of the month, the group chat was quiet. No calls, no texts. It should have hurt, but instead, I felt stronger. Because while they thought they were punishing me by cutting me off, what they were really doing was giving me the one thing I had always wanted: space. And now that I had it, I wasn't planning on giving it back. About 2 weeks after I'd fully moved into my new place, I got a call from my old landlord. At first, I thought it was just a follow-up about the lease termination, but the tone of his voice told me something was wrong. Jake, hey, he said, hesitating a little. I just wanted to check in. Did you give your family permission to start moving things into the apartment after you moved out? I sat up straighter. No. What? He sighed. I thought so. I went by to do the final walkthrough today and noticed some, let's just say, personal items in the unit. Women's clothing, a vanity mirror, a couple of boxes labeled makeup. The lease is still in your name until the end of the month, so technically you're responsible for whatever's in there. I felt a slow smile forming. Thanks for letting me know. I'll take care of it. As soon as I hung up, I drove straight to the apartment. Sure enough, my sister had been busy. The office, what used to be my office, was now decked out with her things. A half-assembled clothing rack stood in the middle of the room, and there was even a framed photo of her and her boyfriend on the windowsill. I just stood there for a minute, taking it all in. This wasn't a temporary crash pad. She was moving in like this was hers, like she'd won. And the thing was, she hadn't even told me. She hadn't asked for a key. She hadn't even texted me. It was perfect. I snapped photos of everything. The boxes, the mirror, the photo. Proof that she'd taken over a space she had no legal right to occupy. Then I gathered everything up, carefully, without damaging anything, and carried it out to my car. I didn't throw it away. No, that would be too easy. I just moved it all into the storage unit with the rest of my things and locked it up tight. When I left the apartment, it was completely empty again. By the time I got back to my new place, my phone was lighting up with angry messages. Where's my stuff? You had no right to touch anything. Mom and Dad are furious. You need to bring it back right now. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the photos I'd taken. Each one was time-stamped and geotagged. Solid proof. And while I was at it, I drafted a short, polite email to the landlord. Hi. Just wanted to confirm that I've cleared the unit completely. There should be no further issues. Please let me know if anyone attempts to enter the property without authorization. I hit send and sat back, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control. That night, I poured myself a drink and started thinking bigger. This wasn't just about keeping my sister out of the apartment anymore. This was about every single time they had steamrolled me. Every time they'd called me selfish for saying no. Every time they'd treated me like a backup plan instead of a person. I opened a notebook and started writing. Step 1. Secure everything. Bank accounts, utilities, digital passwords. I changed them all, one by one. No more just-in-case shared logins. No more documents sitting in unlocked drawers. Step 2. Cut off the spare keys. I called the leasing office and confirmed that I was the only person authorized to access the unit until the end of the lease. Then I double-checked the new place's security system. Step 3. Get leverage. And that's when things got interesting. While scrolling through social media that weekend, I stumbled across a post my sister had made. It was a photo of her sitting on my old couch, the one I'd left behind deliberately, with the caption, "Finally got my own place. Thanks to the best family ever for making it happen." Hundreds of likes, comments congratulating her, people asking when they could come over. And there, in the background of the photo, was one of the boxes I'd moved into storage, timestamped just a day earlier. I screenshotted everything. Then I checked her boyfriend's page, and sure enough, there he was bragging in the comments about how lucky they were that they didn't have to pay rent for a few months while they saved for a trip to Europe. That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't about my sister being desperate for a place to stay. This was about convenience. About them using me to make their lives easier so they could funnel money towards something else. And suddenly, I knew exactly how to make this hurt. I spent the rest of the weekend setting things up, moving the last of my belongings out of the old apartment, scheduling the final inspection, and letting the landlord know I'd be turning in the keys early. I didn't tell my family a thing. Instead, I waited until everything was ready. Because when the moment came, when they showed up expecting to find my apartment waiting for them, they were going to be met with something much, much different. And I wasn't just going to tell them no this time. I was going to show them. Saturday came faster than I expected, but I was ready. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the counter in my new apartment. The quiet felt almost luxurious. My phone buzzed around 9 a.m. with a message from Matt. On our way. Hope you're ready to make this right. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my bag, tossed my new set of keys inside, and drove across town one last time. I parked a few blocks away, out of sight, and walked up just as my family was arriving. I could hear their voices before I turned the corner. My sister laughing, my mom talking about how she wanted to repaint her room. My dad was carrying a box, and Matt had a mattress strapped to the back of his truck. The sight of it all almost made me laugh. They were so sure, so smug, so ready to take what they thought was theirs. I let them get to the door before I approached. "Morning," I said, leaning casually against the railing. They all turned, startled. "Jake," my dad said, narrowing his eyes. "Good. Let's get this over with. Open the door." I smiled politely. "Can't do that." "What do you mean you can't?" my sister snapped. "We've been more than patient." This drama has gone on long enough. Oh, it's over, I said calmly. Just not the way you think. I pulled the keys from my pocket, not the ones they knew, but the brand new set from my new apartment, and dangled them in front of me. This place, I said, gesturing at the door. It's empty. Completely cleared out. Lease is terminated. Keys are turned in. Whatever you thought you were moving into no longer exists. The look on their faces was priceless. What? My mom said, her voice barely a whisper. You heard me, I said. I moved out 2 weeks ago. I have my own place now. Somewhere you can't just walk into whenever you feel like it. My sister's face turned bright red. You had no right. No right. I cut her off, still calm, still steady. This was my apartment. I paid the rent. I paid the utilities. And you decided, without asking me, that you were entitled to it. You packed up my things, opened my mail, used a spare key to let yourself in. You crossed every line there was to cross. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. And just in case you think I'm bluffing, here's proof. Photos of your stuff in the apartment, dated and time-stamped. Screenshots of your little finally got my own place post. Messages from your boyfriend bragging about living rent-free. Do you want me to send these to the landlord? Because I could. He wasn't thrilled when he saw what you'd done. My dad stepped forward, bristling. Jake, this isn't necessary. It is, I said quietly, holding his gaze. Because this isn't about a room or a couch or who sleeps where. This is about the fact that you all decided my life was yours to control. And I'm done letting you. For a moment, there was silence. Then Matt swore under his breath, ripping the mattress off the truck and shoving it back inside. This is insane, my sister hissed. You're seriously just leaving me with nowhere to go? I shrugged. You have plenty of places to go. Grandma's, friends' houses, your boyfriend's. Or, here's an idea. You could get your own apartment, like the rest of us had to. She gaped at me, and I could see my mom about to jump in with another guilt trip, so I cut her off before she could start. Don't, I said. Don't tell me I'm cruel, or selfish, or tearing the family apart. I tried to set boundaries, and you ignored them. You forced my hand. This is on you. I slung my bag over my shoulder, gave them one last look, and said, enjoy the empty apartment. I'm sure the next tenant will love what you've done with the place. Then I walked away. Behind me, I heard my dad call my name once, sharply, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Instead, I got in my car, drove across town, and unlocked the door to my new home. It was quiet, sunlight streaming through the windows, the city humming faintly outside. I set my bag down, took a deep breath, and felt the tension drain out of my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was completely, entirely free of them. But as satisfying as it felt, I knew it wasn't the end. Because now that I had distance and proof, I could finally decide just how far I wanted this to go. And I had a few ideas. I didn't hear from them for 2 full days after that Saturday confrontation. 2 blissful, quiet days where my phone stayed face down on the counter and I cooked dinner in peace, watched a movie on my new couch, and actually slept without waking up angry at 3 in the morning. But silence never lasts forever in my family. By Tuesday afternoon, the group chat came alive again. Only this time, it wasn't yelling. It was damage control. Jake, we overreacted. Your dad wants to talk. Clear the air. Your sister is upset, but she'll get over it if you apologize. Apologize. That word made me laugh out loud. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited until Wednesday, then sent them all a single message. Just a heads up, the lease is officially closed. The landlord has photos of the place completely empty and knows no one has permission to enter. If any of you try to access it again, it's trespassing. Take care. I expected anger. What I got instead was panic. Matt called first. Dude, what are you doing? You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. Bigger than when you broke into my apartment and packed my things without asking? I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. He hesitated. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I cut him off. And now it's over. The locks are changed, the lease is closed, and I'm done. He didn't know what to say to that. The next day, Mom called. She didn't start with an apology. She started with tears. Jake, I don't understand why you're doing this. We're your family. We've always been there for you. I closed my eyes and let her talk, all the while staring out the window at the skyline. You've changed, she said finally, her voice breaking. You're so cold now. No, I said quietly. I'm just done being walked on. You don't get to decide my life for me anymore. You don't get to tell me who lives in my home, or where I sleep, or what I spend my money on. Those days are over. She sniffled. So what now? You're just cutting us off. I let the silence stretch before I answered. No, I'm just putting boundaries in place. If you want to see me, you can ask. If you want to visit, you can wait for an invitation. And if you ever pull something like this again, you won't hear from me for a very, very long time. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, softly, she said, your father won't like that. I smiled to myself. Then I guess I'll have to get used to it. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control, confidence, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for once, they had to live with my decision instead of the other way around. A week later, my sister posted another photo on social media. Not from my apartment this time, but from a tiny sublet across town. The caption read, "Finally got a place of my own, for real this time." The comments were full of congratulations again, but I noticed something different this time. No mention of family, no bragging about rent-free living. I didn't comment. Instead, I closed the app, leaned back on my new couch, and looked around my apartment. My quiet, perfect apartment that no one but me had a key to. For the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. They had tried to take something from me, and I hadn't just stopped them. I'd taken everything back. And as I sat there, the last bit of tension leaving my chest, I thought about the note they had left on my old door. This is bigger than you. It's about family. Maybe they were right. Because now they knew exactly how big I could get when I finally stopped letting them shrink me down to fit their version of family. And the next time they wanted to cross a line, they'd remember this. Because I'd just drawn the clearest one of my life. That was the last message, the last confrontation, the last time I let them take up space in my head. When my phone buzzed again later that night with another group chat notification, I just smiled, turned it face down, and whispered to the empty room. They can knock all they want, but this door stays locked. And for once, I meant it. I'm Alex, 27 now, but this story really started when I was a kid. I grew up knowing exactly where I stood in my family, at the bottom. My parents never bothered to hide it. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child. Everything he did was perfect, even when it wasn't. He got away with skipping school, wrecking my dad's car when he was 16, and even getting arrested once for shoplifting. My parents? They bailed him out, laughed it off, and blamed his troubled genius mind. Me? I got grounded for getting a B in math. I used to think maybe I was imagining it, that maybe all siblings felt like their parents favored one child. But no, my parents made it crystal clear. When I was 10, I asked my mom why Ethan got a laptop for his birthday, and I got a sweater. She didn't even blink when she said, "Because he's special. You're not the favorite. Deal with it." That was their favorite phrase. Deal with it. At 12, I stopped asking for things. At 16, I stopped trying to impress them. And by the time I left for college, I had accepted that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. But the real breaking point didn't come until a year ago. It started with my grandfather's will. He passed away when I was 26, and to my complete shock, he left nearly everything to me. My grandfather and I had always been close. He used to tell me, "Alex, you're the only one in this family with a good head on your shoulders." But I never expected him to actually leave me his house, his savings, and his old car, everything he had. Ethan got nothing. The moment the will was read, the temperature in the room dropped. My mom turned to the lawyer and actually asked if there had been some sort of mistake. Ethan was sitting there, mouth open, looking like someone had just run over his dog. And my dad? He was quiet at first. Then, in the car ride home, he suddenly said, "You know what the right thing to do is?" I just stared at him. "The right thing? You give Ethan half." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. They spent the next 3 weeks calling, texting, and guilt-tripping me. My mom cried about how Ethan was struggling and needed this more than I did. My dad tried the whole family legacy angle. "Ethan? He just sent me texts like you don't even need it. Stop being selfish." It wasn't about the money for them. It was about the fact that, for the first time in my life, I had something they wanted and they couldn't stand it. The worst part? They had never cared about my grandfather when he was alive. They visited him maybe twice a year, always on holidays, just to keep up appearances. But now, suddenly, his money was their business. So, after a month of constant pressure, I cut them off. Completely. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from social media, and changed the locks on my grandfather's house, where I had moved in. It wasn't easy. There were moments where I felt guilty, moments where I almost caved. But then I'd remember all the years of being treated like I didn't matter. They hadn't cared about me when I was growing up. They only cared now that I had something they wanted. And then, a year passed. A peaceful, quiet year where I started living my own life. Until last week. I was coming home from work, exhausted, when I saw them. My parents, standing on my porch. And they weren't alone. Ethan was there too, looking smug, and behind them was a woman I didn't recognize, a lawyer, maybe? My mom's face lit up when she saw me, as if the last year had never happened. "Oh, sweetheart. We were just waiting for you." My dad, standing stiffly, nodded. "We need to talk." And Ethan? He just grinned, like he already knew what was coming next. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I had no idea what they wanted this time, but I knew it wasn't good. I stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, gripping my keys so hard they left marks in my palm. My parents were acting like nothing had happened, like they hadn't spent a year trying to manipulate me into giving up what my grandfather had left me. I glanced at Ethan. He had that smug, lazy grin he always wore when he thought he had already won. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said flatly. My mom gasped, clutching her chest like I had just stabbed her. "Alex, is that any way to talk to your mother?" My dad took a step forward, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "This is serious. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." I raised an eyebrow. "Right. Because the last time I heard from you, it was nonstop messages about how I should give Ethan half of my inheritance. And when that didn't work, you all went silent." I looked at them each in turn, my voice cold. "So what changed?" Ethan scoffed. "Are you done being dramatic?" I turned to him. "Are you done being entitled?" His smirk twitched, but before he could snap back, the woman standing behind them finally spoke. She was tall, in her 40s maybe, with sharp eyes and a black blazer that screamed lawyer. "Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, like she was used to defusing tense situations. "I'm Miss Holloway. Your parents have asked me to mediate a conversation regarding the estate left by your grandfather." I blinked. "There's nothing to mediate." Miss Holloway ignored that and pulled out a folder. "Your parents believe there may have been an error in the will. They'd like to discuss a fair redistribution." I laughed. I actually laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "An error." My mom immediately stepped in. "Sweetheart, you have to understand, your grandfather was very old, and he wasn't always in the best state of mind. He might not have been thinking clearly when he wrote that will." I clenched my jaw. "He was in a better state of mind than you ever gave him credit for." Ethan groaned, rubbing his face. "Look, this is ridiculous. You're living in a house you don't even deserve. You're sitting on money you didn't earn. Meanwhile, I've been struggling, and you don't even care." I tilted my head. Struggling? Ethan wasn't struggling. He had a cushy job at some marketing firm, one that my dad had pulled strings to get him. He still lived in his fancy apartment downtown, drove a car that cost more than my entire college tuition, and spent his weekends partying. "What exactly are you struggling with?" I asked, crossing my arms. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." "No, I think it is." I turned to my parents. "You're actually trying to contest the will?" My dad exhaled sharply. "We don't want it to come to that. But Alex, think about it. Ethan's your brother. We're your family. All we're asking for is some fairness." Fairness? My voice was rising now. Where was fairness when you spent my entire childhood reminding me that I wasn't your favorite? Where was fairness when I had to work twice as hard just to get a fraction of the attention you handed Ethan on a silver platter? My mom sniffled. "We didn't mean to make you feel that way." I shook my head. "You meant every word. And now, because you didn't get what you wanted, you're trying to rewrite history." Miss Holloway cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, your parents are willing to settle this amicably. They simply want a fair division of assets." I turned to her, my voice deadly calm. "And if I say no?" She hesitated. "Then they may have to take legal action." I exhaled slowly, forcing my heartbeat to steady. "You know what's funny?" I said after a moment. "For the first time in my life, I have something you can't control. And you hate it. That's what this is really about." Ethan rolled his eyes. "God, just stop playing the victim," and I stepped forward, cutting him off. "You are not stepping foot in this house." I pointed at my parents. "None of you are." I turned to Ms. Holloway. "Tell them to file whatever paperwork they want. I'll be waiting." And with that, I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and shut it in their faces. I barely made it to the couch before my hands started shaking. They were actually trying to take this to court. I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door like it might burst open at any second. My whole body was tense, my mind running 100 miles per hour. Could they actually do this? Contest the will? I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Turns out, contesting a will wasn't easy. They'd have to prove my grandfather was mentally incompetent when he wrote it, or that he was somehow pressured into leaving everything to me. But I knew for a fact that wouldn't hold up in court. My grandfather had been sharp until the very end. He'd updated his will just 6 months before he passed, completely on his own, with a lawyer he trusted. But the fact that they were willing to go this far, that was what really got to me. After everything, after years of treating me like I was nothing, my parents and Ethan still expected me to hand over what was mine. And when I didn't, they went straight to threats. Well, if they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I half expected my parents to show up again, or for Ethan to send another smug text, but there was nothing. It was unsettling. Then, a week later, I got the letter. A thick envelope in the mail. The return address? A law firm. I ripped it open, my stomach twisting. Inside was an official notice. My parents and Ethan were formally contesting my grandfather's will. I let out a slow breath. They were really doing it. The document claimed my grandfather had been influenced by me and that the will didn't reflect his true intentions. They were asking for the court to either divide the inheritance evenly, or, more insultingly, to give it all to Ethan, because, as the eldest son, he was always meant to inherit the family assets. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Me? Influencing my grandfather? If anything, I had never even talked to him about his will. He had made his decision on his own, probably after years of watching how my parents treated me versus Ethan. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. This was going to court. I wasted no time. I called the lawyer who had handled my grandfather's estate. When I explained the situation, she sighed. I had a feeling this might happen, she said. Your parents were not pleased when they heard the will was ironclad. Can they actually win? I asked. She hesitated. Unlikely, but it depends. If they can convince a judge that your grandfather was manipulated or mentally unfit, they could get some traction. It would still be an uphill battle for them, but it'll cost you time and money to fight it. I gritted my teeth. Of course, that was probably part of their plan, to drag me into court, force me to waste money on legal fees, and wear me down until I caved. They weren't just after the money. This was about control, about punishing me for stepping out of my place. Well, I said, they're in for a surprise. Because if they wanted a war, I was ready to go nuclear. The first thing I did was go through every document my grandfather had left behind. His will, his medical records, his bank statements, everything. I wanted to be ready for anything they threw at me. And the more I dug, the more I realized something. My parents were broke, or at least close to it. They had always acted rich. My dad had a decent job, my mom liked to show off at charity events, and Ethan lived like he had an endless trust fund. But as I looked through old bank records my grandfather had kept, I noticed something disturbing. My parents had been taking loans. Lots of them. Credit lines. Refinancing the house. Cash advances. I sat back, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about greed. This was desperation. That's why they needed my inheritance so badly. Not just for Ethan, but to bail themselves out. And suddenly, I had an idea. A way to turn the tables on them completely. The next time I heard from them was through their lawyer. They wanted a settlement. Basically, they were offering to drop the case if I gave them a reasonable portion of the inheritance. My lawyer called me after reviewing their offer. They're asking for 60%, she said, almost laughing. I shook my head. Unbelievable. They're trying to act like they're being generous, she continued. But honestly, this just makes them look worse. It shows they don't actually believe they can win in court. I grinned. Then let's make sure they lose. I told her to reject the settlement. And then I made a few phone calls of my own. I dug deep into their finances. I found out just how much they owed, how many late payments they had, how they were on the verge of losing everything. Then, I sent an anonymous tip to some financial reporters about a certain well-known family living beyond their means. A few weeks later, an article dropped about local families drowning in debt, living fake wealthy lifestyles. And guess whose names were in it? My parents. The moment the article went public, they panicked. My dad's work found out. My mom's social circle turned on her. Ethan, his image was ruined. And that was before the court case even started. They wanted to play dirty? I had barely begun. The fallout from the article was immediate and brutal. My parents had spent decades curating their image as a wealthy, well-respected family. My mother thrived on her reputation in high society circles, and my father built his career on the illusion of financial stability. But now? Now, their dirty laundry was out in the open for everyone to see. The article didn't just expose their debt, it revealed just how deep the hole was. The loans, the unpaid bills, the second mortgage they had taken out to maintain their perfect lifestyle. Even Ethan's reckless spending habits were put under a microscope. I knew my mother would be devastated. She cared more about appearances than anything. But what really made me smirk was picturing Ethan's reaction. He had always acted like he was untouchable, like money would always magically appear for him. Now, the world saw him for what he really was, an entitled, spoiled brat who had burned through everything his parents had. And the best part? This wasn't even my final move. I expected my parents to come running back, to demand an explanation, to throw another tantrum. Instead, they went quiet. Too quiet. For the next few weeks, I waited for their next move, but all I got were whispers from distant relatives. My aunt called me out of the blue, pretending to check in, but I could tell she was fishing for information. "Your mother is going through a lot right now," she said, voice tight. "Maybe you should reach out." I nearly laughed. "Reach out?" I repeated. "You mean the same woman who just tried to sue me for my own inheritance?" She was hurt, my aunt said, and I could practically hear the mental gymnastics. This has been hard for all of them. I let the silence drag until she got the hint. The next day, I got a text from Ethan. Ethan texted, "Hope you're happy. You ruined Mom and Dad's lives." I replied, "No, they did that to themselves. I just stopped covering for them." Ethan texted, "Grandpa would be ashamed of you." I clenched my jaw. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because I knew exactly what Ethan was doing. He had always been good at guilt-tripping me. For years, he had used our parents' words as weapons, making me feel small, making me question myself. But this time, it didn't work. I replied, "Grandpa left everything to me for a reason. He saw through the lies. Maybe you should too." No response. Typical. Then came the court date. I arrived with my lawyer, dressed sharp but calm. My parents were already seated, looking significantly worse than the last time I saw them. My mother's usual elegance was gone, her makeup looked rushed, and the stress lines around her mouth were deeper. My father looked stiff, his hands clasped so tightly they were turning white. Ethan, on the other hand, looked furious, like a kid who had been told Christmas was canceled. As I sat down, my mother turned to me, her voice low but dripping with venom. "Are you proud of yourself?" I met her gaze evenly. "Are you?" Before she could answer, the judge walked in, and the case began. Their lawyer opened with some half-hearted argument about how my grandfather had been pressured by me, that he hadn't been in his right mind when he changed the will. But the moment my lawyer stood up, she shredded their claims apart with cold, hard facts. She pulled out signed medical reports from my grandfather's doctors, all confirming his mental sharpness. She presented records of his independent meetings with his attorney, proving that he had made his decisions without coercion. Then came the real kicker. She showed a letter. A personal letter my grandfather had written to me before he passed. It wasn't legally necessary, but it was the final nail in the coffin. In it, he explained his decision. He had seen how my parents treated me. He had watched Ethan grow up into someone who felt entitled to everything but worked for nothing. He wanted me to have the resources to build my own life, free from their influence. When I glanced at my parents, my mother had gone pale. My father's jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "Ethan?" He looked betrayed, as if it had never even occurred to him that Grandpa might have actually cared about me more than him. The judge ruled in my favor. The will was upheld. They had lost. After the ruling, I expected an explosion, a screaming match, some final desperate attempt to claw something back. Instead, they just left. No words, no final threats, just silence. I didn't hear from them for months. Not a call, not a text, not even some passive-aggressive email from my mother. It was eerie. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally given up, that they had accepted their loss and moved on. I should have known better. One night, I was coming home late from work when I noticed a car parked across the street from my apartment. Black sedan, tinted windows. It had been there a few times before, but I brushed it off as coincidence. That night, though, as I walked up my front steps, the driver's side window rolled down. And there was Ethan. He looked rough. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his usual smug arrogance replaced with something desperate. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. I turned to unlock my door. "Wait." His voice cracked. Just talk to me for a second. I sighed, crossing my arms. What do you want, Ethan? He swallowed hard. They're gone. I blinked. What? Mom and Dad. They left. His fingers clenched on the steering wheel. After the lawsuit, things got worse. The debts caught up. They burned through everything. The house got foreclosed on last month. I frowned. And Ethan let out a bitter laugh. And they ran, packed up whatever they could and disappeared. No forwarding address. No goodbyes. Nothing. He exhaled sharply. They left me with everything. The collectors, the mess. Just abandoned me. I studied him carefully. For the first time in his life, Ethan was experiencing what I had grown up with, being left behind, being treated as disposable. And it was breaking him. He rubbed his face. I don't know what to do, man. I'm drowning. A long silence stretched between us. And then I said, that's not my problem. His head snapped up. Come on, don't be like that. We're family. No, I said coldly. We're not. Family doesn't treat each other the way you did. Family doesn't stand by while one person is treated like garbage just because it benefits them. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I shot back. And you always chose them. He stared at me, chest rising and falling rapidly. I could see the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, the frustration that, for the first time ever, his words weren't working on me. I turned toward my door. Good luck, Ethan. You're gonna need it. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Through the peephole, I watched him sit there for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, breathing heavily. Then, without another word, he drove away. That was the last time I ever saw him. I don't know where my parents went. I don't care. They built their lives on lies, on manipulation, on using people and throwing them away. And in the end, they did the same thing to their golden child. Poetic, isn't it? You ever have one of those birthdays where you half expect confetti, but end up getting emotional damage instead? Yeah, that was me on my 18th. Hey Reddit, I'm Jimmy, 18 at the time, 19 now. And if you'd told me back then that one ruined birthday would completely change my life, I'd have laughed and said, yeah, sure, right after pigs fly my cake in. Spoiler alert, pigs didn't fly, but something else did. Me, straight out of my parents' house. I grew up in one of those golden child versus invisible child homes, though my parents would never admit it out loud. My sister, Melanie, was the star. She was a year older, the type who could break a plate, and somehow I'd get blamed because you should have stopped her. She was good at school, had this fake sweet charm around adults, and my parents treated her like she personally invented oxygen. Me? I was just Jimmy, the kid who fixed things around the house and somehow made everything less convenient by existing. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't some troublemaker. I got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, even worked part-time at a hardware store to help with gas money. But no matter what I did, it was never quite Melanie level. It started small. When I was 14, I made the school soccer team. My dad shrugged, said, that's good, and went back to helping Melanie with her science fair project. When she got an award for it, they threw her a backyard party, invited half the neighborhood, and plastered it all over Facebook with captions like, so proud of our future scientist. When I scored a game-winning goal a week later, my mom posted a blurry photo with the caption, Jimmy's team did great today. That was the rhythm of our family. Melanie shined, and I was the background lighting. By the time I turned 17, I'd accepted it. My plan was to graduate, get a job, maybe move out quietly, and not look back. But the thing about emotional neglect is that you don't realize how much it builds up until it explodes. And for me, that explosion came wrapped in balloons and betrayal. It was about 2 weeks before my 18th birthday when I asked my mom if we could do something small, just a dinner, maybe a few friends over. I even offered to pay for half since I had some savings from my part-time job. My mom gave me this distracted look while scrolling through her phone and said, oh, Jimmy, that might be tricky. You know how busy things are with Melanie's scholarship ceremony coming up. I nodded, trying to be understanding, but something in my chest sank. It's just a dinner, Mom, I said carefully. I'll handle most of it. She smiled, the kind of smile that says she's already decided no. We'll see, okay? Let's just focus on your sister's big moment first. That phrase, big moment, was practically sacred in our house. Melanie's big moments always took priority. Her dance recitals, her grades, her college applications, her heartbreaks, even her allergies. My big moments were either postponed or overshadowed. But still, I tried to stay hopeful. I thought maybe this time would be different, that turning 18, an actual milestone, would matter. A few days later, I overheard my parents in the kitchen. My dad was saying, "We can't do two celebrations so close together, it'll feel excessive." My mom agreed, exactly. Plus, Melanie's ceremony is the same week. We can't have her feel overshadowed. I froze in the hallway. Overshadowed? By me? The kid they barely noticed unless something was broken? I felt this hollow laugh bubble up in my throat. Apparently, even having a birthday was too much competition for their golden child. When I walked into the kitchen to grab water, they went quiet. My mom gave that tight smile again. "Hey, honey," she said, like nothing was wrong. I mumbled something and went to my room, where I sat for a long time staring at the wall. I remember thinking, it's just a birthday. It's not a big deal. But it was. Not because I wanted cake or gifts, but because I wanted to feel like I mattered, even for one night. A few days later, Melanie waltzed into my room uninvited, as usual, holding a new dress she'd bought. "Mom and Dad said they might cancel your dinner thing," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather. "It's just too much going on with my scholarship dinner, and honestly, you can celebrate later, right?" She said it with that fake sweetness that made people think she was charming. "It's just better if the attention isn't split." I stared at her for a moment, then asked, "You mean you don't want the attention split?" She smiled, like she'd been caught, but didn't care. "Well, yeah, this is my time, Jimmy. You'll have yours someday." That phrase stuck with me. "You'll have yours someday." It sounded like a promise, but in her tone, it felt more like a taunt. Like she already believed her someday would always come before mine. The day of her scholarship dinner came and went. I helped set up the decorations, grilled food, even drove to pick up some guests because Dad's car was acting up. No one thanked me. At one point, someone asked when my birthday was, and my mom laughed lightly. "Oh, it's next week, but we'll probably just keep it low-key this year." Then she turned the conversation back to Melanie's achievements. I smiled politely, but inside, something cracked. It wasn't anger yet, it was exhaustion. The night before my birthday, I asked my parents if we were still doing anything. My mom said, "Oh, honey, we're all just so tired from this week. Let's just rest, okay? Maybe next weekend." Next weekend turned into "we'll plan something later," which turned into nothing. When I woke up on my 18th birthday, there was no card, no happy birthday, nothing. Just the smell of coffee and the sound of my parents laughing in the kitchen with Melanie about some college event she'd been invited to. I sat in my room, staring at my phone, waiting for something, anything. By noon, I realized they weren't going to say a word. That was the first time I felt something deeper than sadness. It was clarity, like a fog lifting, revealing everything I'd been trying to ignore. I wasn't part of this family, not really. I was a placeholder, someone who made things work behind the scenes so their star could shine brighter. I remember standing up, grabbing my jacket, and looking around my room at all the stuff I'd worked hard to buy: my laptop, my guitar, the little secondhand bookshelf I built myself. It hit me then that none of it meant anything if I stayed there. When I finally walked out into the living room, my mom glanced up from her laptop. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Her tone wasn't concerned, just mildly curious, like I was heading to the store. "Yeah," I said. "I'm heading out." Melanie laughed. "On your birthday? Don't be dramatic." I didn't even respond. I just opened the door, stepped out, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. That night, I stayed at my friend Lucas's place. His family threw me a small birthday thing. Cake, a few jokes, nothing fancy, but it felt like the warmest thing I'd had in years. I didn't tell him everything, just that things at home were complicated. He didn't press, and that silence was the kindest gift anyone could have given me. The next few months were rough. I picked up more shifts, moved into a tiny apartment, and started figuring out what independence actually meant. It wasn't glamorous. I burned a lot of noodles and slept on an air mattress for weeks, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned felt like a small rebellion. Every morning I woke up and didn't hear Melanie's voice or my mom's sighs. I felt a strange peace I hadn't known before. But here's the thing about leaving people who underestimated you. They only realize your worth once you're gone. And sometimes, that realization burns. A year later, that's exactly what happened. I'd built something for myself, something big enough that even my family couldn't ignore it. And when Melanie finally found out, her reaction wasn't pride, It was jealousy. The kind that doesn't just ruin a moment. It ruins everything. But that's a story I'll get to soon. Because before the explosion, there was a spark. And that spark started the day she tried to use me for her own gain. I didn't talk to my family for the first few months after I left. I thought the silence would bother me, but it was peaceful. No passive-aggressive remarks. No guilt-tripping sighs. No, why can't you be more like your sister? Comparisons echoing through the house. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your thoughts finally stretch out after being cramped for years. At first, they didn't reach out either. No texts, no calls, not even a "where are you?" from my mom. I think they expected me to come crawling back, like I always did after family arguments. But this time I didn't. I got a job at a small tech repair shop, rented a cheap one-bedroom apartment, and started learning how to live without feeling like a background character in my own life. I'd spend my nights watching YouTube tutorials, fixing laptops people had given up on, or trying to figure out how to start something of my own. The place was small, just a mattress, a desk, and a squeaky fridge, but it was mine. And for a while, that was enough. Then, around the holidays, my mom finally called. It was December, maybe 2 weeks before Christmas. My phone buzzed while I was elbow deep in a dusty old PC. I saw her name, Mom, flash on the screen. For a second, I just stared at it. I almost didn't answer. But some part of me, the kid who still wanted his parents to care, picked up. "Jimmy," she said, her voice oddly cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. It's been a while." "Yeah," I said slowly. "It has." She sighed, the dramatic kind that meant she was about to start guilt-tripping. "You know, your dad and I have been worried sick. You just left. No calls, no messages. Do you know how that made us feel?" I had to bite my tongue. "Do you know how it made me feel?" Almost slipped out. But instead, I said, I needed space. "Well," she continued, her tone sharpening just slightly, "you could have at least told us where you were." Melanie was really upset. That last part made me laugh, quietly, bitterly. Melanie was upset? "Yes," Mom said defensively. "She felt guilty about your birthday. She didn't mean to make it all about her." I didn't buy that for a second. Melanie never felt guilty about anything that didn't benefit her. But I kept my voice calm. "It's fine, Mom. I'm okay." She hesitated. "You know, Christmas is coming up. Why don't you come by? We can have dinner, talk things out as a family." For a moment, I almost said yes. I imagined walking into our old house, the smell of cinnamon and pine, pretending things were fine. But then I remembered how that same house had felt on my birthday morning. Cold, quiet, and full of people who didn't even look up when I left. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Of course, I didn't go. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Lucas's family again, loud, messy, full of laughter. His mom hugged me when I arrived with a store-bought pie, saying, "Jimmy, you didn't have to bring anything." And that one small gesture meant more than anything I'd ever gotten at home. But apparently, my absence at Christmas didn't sit well with my family. 2 days later, I got a text from Melanie. "Melanie, Mom and Dad were really hurt you didn't show up. They said you're being immature. You could at least visit for an hour." Me. They didn't remember my birthday. "Melanie, it was just bad timing. Get over it. You're acting dramatic." That word, dramatic, lit a fuse in me. I typed and deleted 5 different replies before finally settling on. Me. "Maybe I'll visit when they stop pretending you're the only kid they have." She didn't respond. After that, things went quiet again until spring. I'd been saving every paycheck, working overtime, and taking repair orders online. By then, I had a small setup in my apartment. Tools, spare parts, even a logo I designed myself. "Fix It Jimmy." Cheesy, I know, but people remembered it. I started getting regulars. Some even recommended me to their friends. I was proud of that. Then one day, my mom showed up at my apartment. It was a Saturday morning. I was in sweatpants, eating cereal straight from the box, when someone knocked. I opened the door, and there she was, my mom, dressed in her usual floral cardigan, clutching her purse like it was armor. "Mom," I said, surprised. "Can I come in?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. I moved aside, and she stepped in, scanning the room like she was inspecting a motel. "This is where you live?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "Yeah," I said flatly. "It's small, but it's mine." She gave a tight smile. "Well, it's cozy." Then she sat down on the one chair I had and clasped her hands. "Jimmy, I wanted to talk. About your sister." "Of course." What about her? She's applying for a business scholarship, Mom began, and they want her to include a small entrepreneurial project in her portfolio. Something practical, something real world. I told her about your little repair thing, and she thought maybe you could help her out. You know, let her include your business as part of her presentation. It'd really boost her chances. I stared at her. Wait, she wants to use my business? The one I built from scratch. Mom blinked. Don't make it sound so dramatic. It's just a small thing, Jimmy. It would really help her future. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You've got to be kidding me. She can't build something herself. Mom frowned. She's been so busy with school, you know that. Besides, it's just a name on a paper. It's not like it means anything. To her, maybe. But to me, it meant everything. Yeah, I said slowly. It means something to me. She sighed, frustrated now. Why do you always make things so difficult? This could be good for both of you. It shows teamwork. No, Mom, I said firmly. It shows I do the work and she takes the credit, again. Her lips tightened. You're being ungrateful. There it was, the classic guilt card. I'd heard it all my life. Ungrateful for what? For being invisible? For being the backup plan when Melanie needs something? Her expression hardened. Watch your tone, Jimmy. She's your sister. I met her eyes. Yeah, and I'm her brother. But that never seemed to matter before. She stood up, grabbing her purse. Fine, if that's how you feel. I just thought you'd want to help your family. Clearly, you've changed. I have, I said quietly. That's the point. She left without another word. That night, Melanie called. I let it ring twice before answering. Wow, she started, her tone dripping with fake innocence. You really couldn't just say yes? I'm not letting you use my business, Mel. It's not even a real business, she scoffed. You fix old laptops. I just needed something for my portfolio. Then build your own project. She sighed dramatically. You're seriously going to ruin my chance at this scholarship because of some grudge? I felt my jaw tighten. You mean the grudge where you made my 18th birthday vanish? Oh my gosh, are you still on that? She said, laughing like it was a joke. You're unbelievable. I guess I am, I said. Unbelievable enough to say no. She hung up. The next week, my dad called. His tone was harsher, colder. Your mother tells me you're refusing to help your sister. That's ridiculous, Jimmy. We raised you better than that. I wanted to say, you didn't raise me at all, but I bit it back. Dad, I've worked hard on this. I'm not handing it over. She just needs your name on her project, he said sharply. It's family. Don't make this complicated. I'm not making it complicated. You are. He went quiet for a second, then said, You know, this attitude of yours is why things fell apart in the first place. That one stung. I almost laughed, but it came out as more of a sigh. Right. My attitude. Think about it, he said, and hung up. A few days later, I got a message from a mutual friend, someone who went to the same college as Melanie. It was a screenshot of her presentation board. The title, Fix It Innovations, co-founded by Melanie and Jimmy Carter. My stomach dropped. She'd done it anyway. I felt anger flood through me, hot and sharp. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I had told her no. I had said the words, made it clear, and she still stole it. I wanted to call her right then, to scream, to tell her she had no right. But something stopped me. I remembered all the times I'd stood up for myself before, only to be gaslit, told I was overreacting. So instead, I sat there in silence, letting that anger cool into something quieter, something sharper. Because this time, I wasn't going to yell. I was going to wait. And when the right moment came, I was going to show them all exactly what the invisible kid had built while they weren't paying attention. And that moment was closer than any of them realized. When I first saw the screenshot of her presentation, I thought maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe she accidentally left my name on something she meant to edit out later. But deep down, I knew better. Melanie didn't make mistakes. She made moves. Calculated, careful, self-serving moves. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. For maybe an hour. Then I got the second message, a video clip. My friend sent it with the caption, Bro, you're going to want to see this. The video showed Melanie standing in front of a small college auditorium, holding a microphone, giving her presentation. Her tone was confident, smooth, the kind of voice that convinced teachers she was the model student. Behind her, on the projector screen, was a slide titled Fix It Innovations, a sustainable small business. She was talking about my story, my journey, my exact timeline. I started this small business with my brother, Jimmy, she said, smiling brightly. We wanted to make technology repair more accessible for students and local families. While he helped with the hands-on repairs, I handled the business side, the marketing, customer outreach, and management. Hands-on repairs? That was all I did. I'd built the entire thing from scratch, every client, every logo, every line of code for the website. Melanie hadn't lifted a single finger. The crowd clapped politely when she finished. My friend zoomed in on the end of her presentation board. There was even a printed logo of Fix-It Innovations with a tagline I'd written. Fixing the future, one part at a time. That was the moment it stopped being anger. It became betrayal. Not the kind of betrayal that hits fast, but the kind that sinks in slow, like cold water creeping into your clothes. I sat there at my desk, the hum of my soldering iron faint in the background, staring at that video until it looped. My throat felt tight, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to cry or punch a wall. I didn't call her. Not right away. I needed time to think. Because this wasn't just her stealing credit. This was her taking my hard work, my identity, and packaging it into a story that made her look like the hero. For a few days, I tried to focus on my own work. But it was like trying to breathe underwater. Every repair order I completed, every satisfied customer, felt tainted. Like I was building something that someone else was now pretending to own. Then the call started. First, from my mom. Jimmy, I heard from Melanie that you're upset about her project, she said sweetly, like she was talking to a child throwing a tantrum. You know she didn't mean any harm. She used my business, Mom, I said flatly. She lied about helping me. Oh, don't say lied, Mom said quickly. She just exaggerated a little. It's what people do in presentations. It's not that serious. Not that serious. I bit back a bitter laugh. Mom, she took something I worked for and made it hers. That's not exaggeration. She sighed. You always take things so personally. Why can't you be happy for her? She won an award for that presentation, a $5,000 grant for her next project. You should be proud. Proud, I repeated, my voice low. She stole my work and got money for it. Mom's tone turned sharp. Watch how you speak about your sister. She's worked very hard, and if your little project helped her along, that's something to be thankful for. We're a family, Jimmy. We help each other. No, Mom, I said quietly. We don't. I help her. You help her. Dad helps her. Everyone helps her. And she helps herself. There was silence on the other end. Then she muttered, You're being dramatic again, and hung up. A few hours later, Melanie texted me. Melanie, you seriously told Mom I stole from you? Chill out. It's not like I'm making money off your dumb repairs. Me, you literally got a $5,000 grant for my work. Melanie, that's for my future project. You don't even have a company license, Jimmy. It's not like you own anything. Me. So you're saying because I didn't register it, it's free for you to take? Melanie, don't be so petty. You should have helped me when Mom asked. I told them you gave permission. Me. You what? Melanie, chill. Everyone's happy, okay? You get exposure, I get funding. Win-win. Exposure. That word made my skin crawl. I didn't reply. I just set my phone down, staring at the wall, the old paint peeling near the window. For the first time in my life, I realized Melanie wasn't just spoiled, she was ruthless. She didn't care who she stepped on, as long as she came out shining. Over the next few weeks, her success became a family obsession. My parents called to brag about her every few days. Did you see the article the college posted about Melanie's project? My dad said one night over the phone. They even mentioned your name. That's nice, isn't it? My name's mentioned once, Dad. She took all the credit. Well, he said, with a dismissive chuckle, she did put in a lot of work preparing that presentation. You didn't even go to college, Jimmy. You wouldn't understand how stressful it is. That one cut deeper than I wanted to admit. He didn't even realize what he was saying, that my work didn't count because it wasn't dressed up in academic polish. Because I hadn't taken the right path. I hung up before he could say anything else. A week later, Melanie reached out again, this time with fake warmth in her voice. Hey, little bro, she said, her tone sugary. Listen, I need a favor. You remember that grant money I got? Well, they want me to expand the project, make it more real, you know? So I need your help fixing up a few old laptops for a demo. I let out a humorless laugh. You've got to be kidding. I'll pay you, she said quickly. Not a lot, but I cut her off. Melanie, you stole from me. You lied to our parents, your school, and whoever gave you that grant. And now you want me to help you again. Her voice hardened. Jimmy, stop being so dramatic. You should be grateful I'm even offering to involve you. You'd never get attention like this on your own. That did it. Attention? I don't want your attention. I want my work to be mine. You can have the spotlight, Melanie. Just stop pretending you built the stage. There was a long pause. Then she said coldly, you'll regret this. Click. After that, I didn't hear from her for almost 2 months. I tried to move on, focused on getting my business officially registered, updating my website, networking online. Word started to spread. I got a couple of small contracts with local schools, repairing their computer labs. It wasn't huge money, but it was enough to start feeling real. Then, out of nowhere, it happened again. I was at work one afternoon when Lucas rushed in, holding his phone. Dude, you've got to see this. He handed me the phone. It was a link to a YouTube video, College Innovators of the Year, Melanie Carter's Tech Initiative. My stomach twisted as I hit play. There she was again. My sister, sitting on a panel, dressed perfectly, smiling for the cameras. Behind her, a banner displayed Fix-It Innovations. My logo, slightly altered but unmistakable. She talked about her journey, how she'd started a small tech repair venture with her brother, and how it inspired her to launch a startup that provides free refurbished devices to underprivileged students. The audience applauded. She beamed. And then I saw it. A close-up shot of one of the laptops she was showcasing. The sticker on the bottom corner said fixitjimmy.com. My website. I felt my whole body go cold. She'd taken everything, my name, my work, my story, and twisted it into her own fairy tale. When the video ended, I realized my hands were trembling. Lucas looked at me carefully. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah, but I wasn't. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen, watching her smile, watching her lie, watching everyone clap for her like she was some kind of saint. Something broke in me that night. The kind of break that doesn't make noise. It just leaves you completely still. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Because in that moment, I realized something that had taken me 19 years to learn. The only way to beat someone like Melanie wasn't to fight for fairness. It was to let her build her house of lies as high as she could, and then pull one brick. The right brick. The one that would make the whole thing come crashing down. And that moment, that perfect brick, was about to reveal itself in a way none of us expected. When I think back to that winter, it still feels like someone hit pause on everything in my life. Time kept moving, but I didn't. My business slowed down. I stopped updating my website, stopped taking big repair jobs, stopped checking emails. Every time I powered on a computer, I thought of Melanie's fake smile flashing across that YouTube video. People kept congratulating her for our idea. That video spread fast. It got reposted on her college's official page. Then a local news site picked it up under the headline, Young Innovator Bridges Technology Gap. They even quoted her. It all started with a vision my brother and I shared. We wanted to change lives. That line made me feel physically sick. She made it sound like I'd been part of her team. But I wasn't. I was her shadow, the silent prop in her story. At work, Lucas noticed I wasn't myself. I'd stare off during lunch, or mess up simple repairs I could normally do with my eyes closed. One day he said, "You can't keep letting her live rent-free in your head, man." I shrugged. She's not in my head. She's in my life. Big difference. He didn't argue, just sighed and said, "Then make her pay rent." Easier said than done. The thing is, I didn't want revenge, not yet. I wanted peace. But peace didn't come easy when your phone kept lighting up with reminders of what you'd lost. It started with a call from my dad. "Jimmy," he said sternly, "your sister's trying to reach you. You should talk to her. She's got an incredible opportunity now. Some company's looking to invest in her project. Isn't that great?" I didn't respond. He continued, oblivious to the irony. "She told them all about you too. You might even get a small role if she decides to expand the team. That could be good exposure for you." I laughed softly. It wasn't even real laughter, just disbelief spilling out of me. Exposure again. Right. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, his voice hardening. "It means I'm not her accessory," I said. He sighed, disappointed. "You've always been so sensitive. Why can't you just be supportive? You're her brother." "Yeah," I said quietly. I was. After that, I blocked his number. It wasn't an angry decision, just necessary. I couldn't keep listening to them twist everything until I doubted myself again. But even with the silence, things kept getting worse. One morning, I got an email from a local school district, the same one that had hired me for computer repairs a few months earlier. They wrote that they'd decided to end my contract. The reason? They'd partnered with Fix-It Innovations, the larger organization now operating under Melanie's name. My chest went tight as I reread the message. She hadn't just stolen credit anymore. She was taking my clients. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, staring at the half-finished repairs, the tools scattered everywhere, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe she'd been right. Maybe I wasn't built for this. What was I, really? Some kid fixing broken laptops in a one-room apartment, while she stood on stages and smiled for cameras. People saw her as the visionary, and me as what? The technical assistant who couldn't get over himself? I remember standing in the middle of that room and whispering to no one. Maybe I should have just let her take it. But I didn't mean it. Not deep down. It was exhaustion talking, the kind that creeps into your bones and convinces you it's easier to stop fighting. I shut down my workspace that night, packed the tools into boxes, turned off the lights, and for the first time since leaving home, I felt completely empty. For the next few weeks, I lived in quiet. Not peace, but numb quiet. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, and lie on the couch staring at the ceiling. Lucas tried checking in, but I kept telling him I was fine. The truth was, I didn't even know what fine meant anymore. It was during one of those nights, half asleep, phone buzzing on the table, that everything changed again. A text from Melanie. Melanie, hey, I know you're mad at me, but can we talk? Me, about what? Melanie, about everything. I think we can fix this. I want to make it right. I didn't believe her, but something about the message, maybe the word fix, made me pause. Me, I'm not sure there's anything to fix. Melanie, just meet me. Please. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the cafe near campus. Against every rational part of me, I went. When I got there, she was already sitting by the window, dressed like she'd come straight from another interview. Neat blazer, expensive bag, that same flawless composure she always had. When she saw me, she smiled. Jimmy, she said softly, like nothing had ever happened. You look good. Cut the act, I said, sitting down. What do you want? Her smile faltered for half a second, but she quickly recovered. I just want to clear the air. I know things got messy. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean to take my business? Or to use my name without asking? Or to steal my clients? She sighed. You're exaggerating again. Look, I can't undo what's already public, but I can make sure you're part of it moving forward. Officially, we could register Fix-It Innovations together. 50-50. Think about it. I stared at her. You want me to join the company you built on a lie? She leaned in. Jimmy, people already see us as partners. Why not make it real? You'd get funding, recognition, stability. Isn't that what you wanted? For a moment, I didn't speak. The way she said it, smooth, persuasive, it almost sounded reasonable. But then I saw it. The tiny twitch in her smile when she thought she was winning. The same one she'd had since we were kids. Stability for who? I asked. You or me? Both, she said quickly. Jimmy, come on. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Something in me snapped then, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a cord fraying after being stretched too long. You don't want a partner, I said slowly. You want a pawn. Her eyes flashed. That's not true. It is, I said. You don't build. You take. You take credit, attention, sympathy, whatever gets you ahead. You took my work, my clients, and my name, and now you want me to stand next to you so it looks legitimate. Her mask cracked then, just slightly. You think you can do better without me? Who even knows who you are? I smiled faintly. Not many people, but the right ones will. That wiped the smile clean off her face. You're going to regret this, she hissed. Maybe, I said, standing. But at least I'll know it's my regret. I walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment for hours, thinking about what she'd said, about how I'd gotten here, how easily she'd stripped away everything I'd worked for. I thought about leaving again, starting over somewhere else, maybe in another city, where the name Fix-It didn't follow me around like a shadow. But the more I thought about it, the more something inside me shifted. Leaving hadn't solved it the first time. It had just delayed it. If I wanted peace, I'd have to earn it. Not by running, but by standing my ground. So, the next morning, I went to the business registry office. It was a small building downtown, the kind that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. I walked up to the counter and said, I want to register a business. The clerk nodded. Name? I smiled. For the first time in months, I actually meant it. Carter Tech Solutions. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and this time, it would stay that way. From that day on, I went quiet. No social media posts, no arguments, no calls. I worked in silence, rebuilding everything she'd tried to destroy. While Melanie was out there giving speeches, I was in the background, fixing, learning, expanding. I took night courses in digital systems and marketing. I built new networks. I started a YouTube channel showing how to repair basic tech at home. It started small, but by the third month, one of the videos hit 50,000 views. I didn't announce it to anyone. Not yet. Because this time, I wasn't chasing attention. I was building something stronger than validation. I was building a foundation she couldn't touch. And quietly, piece by piece, the plan started forming in my mind. A plan to take back everything she'd stolen, not with shouting or begging, but with proof. Real, undeniable proof. And when that moment came, when the truth finally caught up to her, there'd be no stage big enough to hide on. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. Because first, I had to make sure the next time Melanie said my name, she'd be the one standing in my shadow. If I had to pinpoint the exact moment everything started turning around, it wasn't a sudden stroke of luck or some big cinematic aha moment. It was a Tuesday, a quiet, unremarkable Tuesday. The kind where the world feels still and your mind finally clears enough to think. I was sitting at my desk in my small apartment, same place that had seen my lowest nights, going through repair orders. I had about 7 laptops lined up and a notebook full of pending requests from small schools and local nonprofits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People trusted me because I actually fixed their problems instead of pitching them an image. That was something Melanie never understood. Attention is fleeting, but trust is currency. I'd officially registered Carter Tech Solutions 6 months earlier, and since then, I'd poured every ounce of focus into it. I treated it like my second life. During the day, I worked with clients and managed repairs. At night, I learned marketing, SEO, business licensing, branding, even customer psychology. I didn't just want to fix devices anymore. I wanted to build something that lasted. At first, it was slow. Some days I'd make $40, other days nothing. But little by little, word spread. People recommended me online. I partnered with a few small stores to handle overflow repair jobs. One school district that had dropped me earlier came back after their Fix-It Innovations contract fell through. Turns out, Melanie had no idea how to actually run the service once the spotlight faded. When that school called me again, I almost didn't answer. But then I thought about it and smiled. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming what I'd built. The woman on the phone said, "We'd like to rehire you, Mr. Carter." The other provider didn't quite meet expectations. I almost laughed. "I'd be happy to help," I said. That one call changed everything. A few weeks later, I had a new client base, steady work, invoices, legitimate contracts. My business stopped being a side hustle and started looking like a future. But the real breakthrough came by accident. One night, I filmed myself fixing a cracked laptop screen and explaining the process step by step. I uploaded it to YouTube mostly for fun, under the channel name Jimmy Fixes Things. The next morning, it had 10,000 views. By the end of the week, 100,000. People loved how simple and calm my explanations were. The comments section was full of things like, "Finally, someone who doesn't overcomplicate tech stuff. You actually saved me money, dude. Subscribed. Why does this feel like therapy for my broken laptop?" I started uploading weekly. Tutorials, repair tips, even small stories about customers I'd helped. Nothing fancy, just honesty, competence, and a bit of humor. The kind of content that made people feel they were learning from a friend, not a brand. By the 4th month, I hit 50,000 subscribers. Then 100,000. Sponsorship emails started trickling in, tool companies, tech brands, even a few startup incubators offering partnership deals. That's when it hit me. I'd accidentally built something my sister could never fake. She could mimic my story, but she couldn't mimic me. While she was busy posing for staged interviews, I was connecting with real people. People who trusted my work, who knew my voice, who saw the authenticity she lacked. Still, I didn't brag. I didn't post about it. I didn't even tell my parents. Instead, I focused on scaling. I hired Lucas part-time to help with customer management. We moved operations into a small rented workspace, a 700 square foot garage behind an electronics store that smelled faintly of solder and fresh paint. I bought used workbenches, installed shelves, and hung a simple sign. Carter Tech Solutions, honest repairs. Real results. When I turned the lights on that first night, I felt something I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. Not joy, not pride, control. It wasn't flashy. There was no applause. Just the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint clink of tools as Lucas unpacked boxes. But it was ours. One evening, after closing up, Lucas looked around and said, "Dude, this feels like the start of something." I nodded. It is. A few months later, it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was reality. By summer, I was making more per month than I ever had in a year. I had contracts with 2 school districts, 3 local businesses, and a small chain of repair shops that outsourced complex jobs to me. My YouTube channel hit 300,000 subscribers. I even got invited to speak at a local youth tech workshop about entrepreneurship. I stood in front of that crowd, dozens of students, some not much younger than me, and shared everything I'd learned. I didn't talk about success like a victory lap. I talked about failure and the quiet work that follows when no one's clapping. I talked about how people can steal your ideas, your credit, even your voice, but not your growth. When I finished, the audience clapped. It wasn't like Melanie's fake applause. This was different, genuine. That night, I went home to dozens of messages on Instagram and YouTube, people thanking me, asking for advice, sharing their own stories. It was overwhelming in the best way, but not everyone was happy for me. It started subtly. My mom texted after months of silence. "Mom, we saw your video. You've really grown up." Melanie showed us. She said she's proud of you. That one line, "Melanie showed us," made my stomach turn. Of course she had. She always found a way to insert herself into my story. I ignored it. Then, 2 weeks later, I got an email from a journalist. "Hi Jimmy, I'm writing an article about young entrepreneurs in tech. I recently interviewed your sister, Melanie Carter, and she mentioned your business as part of her original inspiration. I'd love to include your side of the story." I stared at the screen for a long time. So now she was using my comeback as her new PR angle. The prodigy who inspired her brother. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to think. That same week, one of my newer clients, a small educational nonprofit, forwarded me a LinkedIn post. It was from Melanie. She'd shared a picture of herself at a fancy networking event, captioned, "So proud to see the growth of Fix-It Innovations. My brother and I started this dream together, and watching him thrive reminds me why we began." The comments were full of praise. "What an amazing duo. Sibling entrepreneurs, that's inspiring. You both are making a difference." I felt my hands shake as I read through them. Not from anger this time, but from something colder. Calculation. She hadn't changed. She'd just adapted. But what she didn't know was that this time, I had everything she didn't. Proof, presence, and people who actually cared. So I made a decision. For months, I'd avoided the spotlight, focusing on the work instead of the noise. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. Not out of ego, but out of clarity. People needed to know the truth. So I accepted that journalist's offer. When we met for the interview, she asked me, "Is it true you and your sister started Fix-It together?" I smiled politely. "No," I said. "I started a small repair service called Fix-It Jimmy back in high school. My sister later used the name in her presentation. I didn't find out until after she won a grant for it." The journalist raised an eyebrow. "So she used your work without permission?" I nodded. "Let's just say we had different ideas about collaboration." She laughed softly, sensing the tension beneath my calm tone. "And now, I said, I have my own company, Carter Tech Solutions. We focus on honest service. No PR gloss, just results." The article went live 2 weeks later. Title, "From Stolen Idea to Startup Success. The Real Story Behind Carter Tech." It blew up. Thousands of shares, comments, discussions. Most people sided with me. Some criticized her. Others called it sibling rivalry. But the truth was finally out there. Melanie didn't respond publicly at first, but I knew she saw it. She couldn't resist attention like that. A few days later, I got a message from her. "Melanie, you didn't have to humiliate me like that." Me, I didn't. I just told the truth. "Melanie, you're ungrateful. After everything I tried to do for you." Me, you mean everything you tried to take from me. She didn't reply again, but the fallout had already begun. Her investors pulled out of Fix-It Innovations within weeks. Rumors spread that she'd misrepresented her business model. The college quietly removed her name from their Innovators of the Year list, replacing it with a vague note about academic review. Meanwhile, my company kept growing. A year after I'd registered it, Carter Tech Solutions had tripled in revenue. I had 4 employees, an office twice the size of the old workshop, and a partnership with a major tech brand that wanted me to run a pilot program teaching repair skills in schools. And still, I hadn't spoken to my parents. They reached out sometimes, texts, voicemails, but I wasn't ready. Every time I thought about that empty 18th birthday, about my mom's dismissive voice saying, "You always take things so personally," I realized how much distance I still needed. But life was good, peaceful even. I was finally becoming someone who didn't need their approval or anyone's. And that's exactly when Melanie showed up again. Not with an apology, not with humility, with a plan. A plan so brazen it made everything she'd done before look like child's play. And the moment I heard it, I knew this wasn't over yet. I should have known she wouldn't stay quiet forever. Melanie was never the type to vanish when her empire started crumbling. She was the type to double down, dig deeper, and convince herself that if she smiled hard enough, the truth would look like a misunderstanding. It started one Sunday morning, almost a year after the article. I was in the office early, half asleep with coffee in hand, reviewing invoices. The shop was quiet except for the low buzz of equipment and the rhythmic tapping of Lucas typing on his laptop in the corner. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe anyway. Jimmy. The voice was hesitant but familiar. Yeah. Who's this? It's Dad. I froze. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. He cleared his throat. Listen, your sister, she's been having a rough time. I think you two should talk. She said she has an idea that could fix things. For both of you. I almost laughed. You really think she wants to fix things? She said she's learned her lesson, he replied. She wants to make peace. Peace. That word sounded like a bad joke coming from him. Still, I didn't hang up. Some part of me was curious. What could Melanie possibly want now, after everything? Fine, I said finally. Tell her she can email me. That night, I got her message. Subject, let's talk business. It was classic Melanie, short, confident, pretending nothing had happened. She wrote that she'd started a new company idea and wanted to combine forces with me. Apparently, a few of her contacts from college wanted to invest in a new educational tech startup, and she didn't want to do it without me. I read it 3 times before I realized what she was really saying. She needed me. Her reputation was wrecked after the truth came out, and now she was trying to use my credibility to climb back up. Still, I didn't delete it. Because for the first time, I realized something. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. So I replied, me, sure. Let's talk. We met at a coffee shop downtown. I arrived early, watching from the window as she walked up. Same confident stride, designer coat, sunglasses she didn't need. When she spotted me, her face lit up with that trademark Melanie smile, the kind that made everyone else think she was warm and genuine. Jimmy, she said, sitting down. You look successful. Thanks, I said coolly. You too. Or, at least, you used to. She didn't flinch. I deserved that. That surprised me. Melanie never admitted fault. Look, she continued, leaning forward. I messed up. I know that. But I also know we're stronger together. You've built something incredible, and I can help you take it further. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the company you try to steal from me? She gave a nervous laugh. Okay, fair. But I'm serious this time. I've learned a lot since then. I have investors ready to fund a joint project, something big. We could launch a national repair education platform. Train kids, certify programs, expand across schools. You have the technical side. I have the network. The way she said it, so polished and persuasive, almost sounded reasonable. But I'd learned my lesson. What's in it for you? I asked. She smiled faintly. A second chance. And maybe redemption. I wanted to believe that last part. Really. But I didn't. Not yet. Still, something about the proposal stuck in my mind after she left. Because the truth was, she wasn't wrong. The idea was good. A scalable education platform tied to repairs and tech accessibility could actually help people. The difference was, this time, I wasn't walking into her world. She was stepping into mine. So I played along. We spent the next few weeks in meetings, me, her, and 2 potential investors she'd managed to charm. I kept my guard up, but pretended to relax. Lucas called it a bad idea wrapped in good lighting. I told him to trust me, because by now, I had a plan. While Melanie was busy drafting her pitch decks and branding proposals, I was talking to my legal advisor, a friend from one of the schools I'd worked with who'd gone into business law. He helped me quietly file new patents and trademarks for the educational tech curriculum I'd been developing. It wasn't public yet, but I'd been working on a digital learning program for months, interactive repair modules, certification systems, and a virtual classroom structure. When Melanie pitched our joint idea to her investors, she unknowingly described my existing project, Carter Tech Academy, word for word. I sat there in the meeting, sipping coffee, saying nothing as she proudly showcased my diagrams. The investors were impressed. This could really change things, one said, if you can integrate the tech properly. Melanie smiled. We're already in development. I smiled too. After the meeting, she was glowing. See, she said, we make a great team. Yeah, I said, my tone calm. We do. I didn't tell her that every document, every presentation, every asset she'd shown was built on intellectual property that now legally belonged to me. Over the next few weeks, I let her run wild. She scheduled press teasers, social media campaigns, even hinted online about a major new project with my brilliant brother. I didn't stop her. The more she bragged, the more she tied herself to it publicly. Then came the investor signing meeting, the day her whole illusion would crumble. We met in a downtown boardroom, sleek and sterile, with a glass table that reflected the tension in the room. The investors were ready to finalize the partnership and sign off on the initial funding. Melanie was radiant, talking a mile a minute. This collaboration represents a new era in accessible tech education, she said proudly. We're calling it Carter Tech Academy. The investors smiled. Excellent. We're excited to get started. Let's make it official. They slid the papers across the table. Melanie signed first, a flourish of her usual confidence. Then they handed the pen to me. I didn't sign. Instead, I leaned back and said, before we move forward, there's something you all should know. The room went quiet. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were all the registration papers, trademarks, patents, and contracts, each one bearing my company's name, my legal signature, and my date of filing. I laid them on the table, one by one. Carter Tech Academy is already an established entity, I said evenly, fully owned by Carter Tech Solutions. All associated technology, branding, and IP are registered under my company. The investors blinked. Wait, so? I nodded. Yes, I own it. Everything you've seen today is built from Carter Tech's internal research. Ms. Carter here has no legal stake in it. Melanie's face went pale. Jimmy, what are you doing? Correcting history, I said. She tried to laugh it off. He's joking. This was a partnership idea. We developed this together. No, I interrupted softly. You pitched it. I built it. And since you've been using my company's intellectual property without permission again, I'll be contacting legal counsel this afternoon. The investors exchanged nervous looks. One cleared his throat. Is this true, Ms. Carter? She stammered. I had no idea. I stood up. That's fine. You don't need to. Because from this point forward, Carter Tech Academy will move ahead independently. I gathered my documents, nodded politely at the investors, and walked out. Melanie followed me into the hallway, her heels clicking like gunshots. You set me up, she hissed. I turned, calm. No, Mel. You set yourself up. I just stopped cleaning your messes. You think this makes you better than me? She snapped, her voice trembling now. You embarrassed me again. In front of investors. I took a step closer. You embarrassed yourself when you thought you could use me twice. You don't get to rewrite my work anymore. For a second, she looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe apologize, maybe scream, but nothing came out. She just stood there, her perfect facade cracking for the first time. I walked away before she could recover. The fallout came fast. The investors withdrew completely, citing misrepresentation of ownership. Word got around in their circles, and Melanie's reputation, already fragile, finally shattered. Meanwhile, Carter Tech Academy launched quietly 3 months later. We partnered with local schools to offer free digital repair lessons for students and low-income families. It became one of the most fulfilling projects I'd ever done. The media picked up on it again, this time with headlines like, From Family Betrayal to Innovation. Carter Tech's mission to empower. And while I was giving an interview one afternoon, the reporter asked, "What inspired this journey?" I smiled. Being underestimated. It wasn't anger anymore. Not even revenge. It was closure wrapped in progress. Still, sometimes I wondered what happened to Melanie after everything. She went silent online, her social media accounts deleted, her name fading from the local spotlight she'd once lived for. I didn't miss her, but I did wonder if she ever looked back and realized the truth. She'd spent her whole life chasing the light, not realizing it came from the fire she started behind her. And I was done burning quietly, because now I had something she'd never understand. Peace, purpose, and power earned the hard way. But then, one quiet evening, as I locked up the office and stepped into the cool night air, I saw her name again. In my inbox. Subject, "You think you've won." And just like that, I knew it wasn't over yet. That email sat unopened in my inbox for 3 days. I'd glance at it between meetings, during lunch, before bed, every time, my finger hovering just above the screen. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I knew whatever words waited inside would be the last ones I'd ever read from my sister. On the 4th night, I finally opened it. Subject, "You think you've won." From Melanie Carter. The email wasn't long, barely 3 paragraphs, but it carried the same venom wrapped in politeness she'd always used. "You think this makes you better than me? That just because you embarrassed me again, people will forget what you really are? You've always been jealous, Jimmy. You needed me to fail to make yourself feel successful. You stole the spotlight because you could never create your own. Congratulations on your company, your academy, your little redemption arc. Just remember, people love underdogs until they start winning. Then they'll turn on you, too. Enjoy it while it lasts. Don't worry, you'll never hear from me again." I read it twice, then hit archive. No response. No anger. Nothing. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove her wrong, because life was already doing that for me. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. My parents reached out soon after, first my mom, then my dad. Apparently, Melanie had moved out of state. No forwarding address, no explanation. My mom's voice cracked when she told me. She said she needed space, she murmured. "I think she's embarrassed. Maybe she'll come around." I didn't say anything for a while. Then, gently, "Maybe she just needs time to realize that space doesn't fix everything." Mom sighed. "You sound just like your father." Funny thing was, I didn't. Not anymore. Dad called a few days later. He sounded tired. Older than I remembered. "I owe you an apology, son," he said quietly. "For a lot of things. I didn't see it back then, how we treated you. I thought we were doing what parents should, supporting the kid with the most potential. But we forgot that both of you had potential, just in different ways." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Hearing that after years of silence felt like someone reopening an old wound just to stitch it properly this time. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said finally. "I really do. Are you happy, Jimmy?" It was such a simple question, but it landed heavy. I looked around my office, employees laughing near the back table, screens humming softly, the faint smell of coffee and solder in the air. Outside, the Carter Tech sign glowed against the evening sky, clean and bright. "Yeah," I said. "For the first time, I think I am." He let out a shaky breath. "Then I guess I did something right after all." We talked for a bit longer, small things, surface things, but it was enough. Not forgiveness, exactly. Just peace. After that, I went back to work, back to life. Months rolled by. Carter Tech Academy grew faster than I expected. The educational program expanded to 4 cities. We got a government grant, then a national partnership. Suddenly, I was sitting in meetings with people who'd once ignored my emails. Every time I stood on a stage now, talking to students, explaining how tech repair could be a gateway to opportunity, I'd think back to that kid who just wanted his parents to remember his birthday, and how that disappointment had shaped everything that came after. One afternoon, after a long workshop, I walked out of the conference center and saw a woman standing near the parking lot. She wore sunglasses and a dark coat, hands tucked into her pockets. I wouldn't have recognized her right away. She looked thinner, her posture smaller, but something about the way she turned her head made my chest tighten. "Melanie," I said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Hey, little brother." Her voice was softer than I remembered. No confidence, no polish, just tired. "What are you doing here?" "I was nearby," she said, looking at the ground. "Saw your name on the event board." I didn't know what to say. After everything that had happened, after years of manipulation, silence, and bitterness, it felt surreal just seeing her standing there like any other person. You look different, I said. She gave a faint smile. So do you. Successful suits you. Thanks. We stood there for a long time, neither of us moving. Finally, she said, you know, I kept waiting for you to fail. I thought it would make me feel better. But it didn't. It just made me realize how much energy I wasted trying to outshine you. I stayed silent. She looked up, eyes glassy. I ruined everything, didn't I? I didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, you did. She nodded slowly. I know. I thought if I could just be perfect, they'd love me more. And if I kept you under me, they'd never notice how afraid I was of being nothing. Her words hit harder than I expected. Because for the first time, I saw not the manipulative sister who'd stolen my work, but a person who'd spent her whole life chasing approval like oxygen. I don't hate you, Mel, I said quietly. I just don't trust you. She wiped at her face. That's fair. We stood there a moment longer. Then she said, for what it's worth, you deserve that birthday. And everyone after it. Then she turned and walked away before I could respond. I never saw her again. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone else left. The city lights blinked through the window, soft and distant. I thought about everything. The fights, the silence, the anger, the rebuilding. And for the first time, none of it felt heavy. Because now I understood something that took me years to learn. Revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about reclaiming what they took. Your voice, your dignity, your peace, and standing so tall that they can't reach you anymore. Melanie had chased the spotlight her whole life. I'd spent mine learning to build the power behind it. And when the lights finally dimmed, she was left with nothing but the shadow of what she'd tried to steal. A few months later, Carter Tech Academy was featured on national television. The host introduced me as a young innovator who turned betrayal into brilliance. I smiled at that because it wasn't really brilliance. It was survival, the kind you only learn when no one else is clapping. When the segment ended, I walked outside, feeling the cool air against my face. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks from a nearby festival painted the sky red and gold. I pulled out my phone, glanced at the date, and laughed quietly. It was my birthday. I hadn't even realized. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the bursts of color fade into the dark. And then I whispered to myself, almost as a reminder, almost as a promise. I finally got my spotlight. Then I smiled, walked to my car, and drove home, knowing that for the first time in my life, I didn't have to look back.